Well, we may as well start now. Would please, yeah. Oh, we just wait a sec. Wait. No, I don't think it is. Finish that. Testing, mics are on, I can hear. Okay. Right, good afternoon everybody. My name's Paul Wynne. Oh, so I can take this off. My name's Paul Wynne. I'm chair of this planning meeting, chair of the planning for North and Central. Nice to see everybody. Been a long time, been 14 months we've had a live meeting. We've got a lot of new councillors here, which is good to see. So, excuse me, names and things, we'll get there in the end. So it's all different this is from our normal meetings, but we shall persevere. A few house rules first. Can everybody make sure their phones are off, please, or turned down? And during the meeting, if you can indicate when you want to speak, I'll make a note of who's in turn, and you only can speak through me, okay? You'll indicate, I'll see it, I'll write your name down, and we'll do it like that, okay? And when you speak, could you just shout out your name as well, please, so all the audience, the public can hear you, and all the new members get to know each other, okay? Number 8, applications being withdrawn. We have a few notes first before we start from the theatre. There are no planned fire alarm tests this afternoon. We operate and manage evacuation procedure, and you will be assisted and directed by a member of the theatre staff to the nearest fire exit. In the event of evacuation, the assembly point is Frankwell Shortstay car park. Toilets are located on the riverside of the building on every floor. The wearing of masks is mandatory when the theatre building, but may be removed if you are speaking in the committee. Please observe social distancing rules at all time. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Right, so now we'll... Sorry, Gary?
Why is the wearing of masks while we're sat down mandatory?
Because it's the theatre rules.
But
theatre rules, full stop.
So
moving on.
I can go to a pub across the road and spend all day sitting without a mask on, but in the theatre here, with all the space around me, I have to wear a mask.
I'm sorry, it's the theatre rules. That's it.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I'd like to put an objection to that, because it's a ridiculous rule.
We can object that after the meeting, but as you stand now, you've got to wear your masks. Right, we'll introduce ourselves now. We can start from the right. If Mike, if you would, could you introduce yourself and your ward, please? Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't see you there. Mark first.
Mark Jones, Vice Chairman, and I'm from the Caboyne, Salatin and Western Rhyn parishes.
I'm Mike Isherwood. I'm the member for Oswestry West.
Ted Clark. I'm a member for the combined Basinal Column and Sutton ward in Shrewsbury.
Jeff Elder, I'm the member for Ellesmere Urban.
Gary Burchett, I'm the member for Bagley in Shrewsbury.
Councillor Joyce Barrow, member for St Oswald.
Gerald Aiken, member for Whitchurch South.
Councillor David Vasmer, I'm a councillor for Underdale in Shrewsbury.
Edward Towers, representing the Wem division, which is Wem Rural and Wixel as well.
Officers, please. Kelvin, could you start, please?
Kelvin Hall, Principal Planner.
Philip Mullineux, Principal Planner.
Miranda Garrard, Solicitor.
Thank you very much. There's a couple of you with the speakers a bit far away. Gerald, Joyce, if you just pull them a bit closer to yourself so I can... You're very faint. Joyce, could you pull your speaker closer?
Pardon?
Could you pull your speaker closer to you?
Oh, yes, sure.
Is that better?
Bit better, bit closer, Gerald.
I'll be swallowing if I get any closer.
Is that okay, Paul?
Right, thank you very much. So, now we can move on to the agenda. So, apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies?
Councillor Wagner will be here late at 2 o'clock.
Could I ask why?
I had no prior engagement at 1 o'clock.
Why didn't he tell me this morning?
I cannot say, but I know that he had a prior engagement. Obviously, the meeting was originally scheduled.
I'll slap his wrist later. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Chair, there's an apology from Councillor Vince Hunt, and Gerald Dakin is substituting.
Thank you, Miranda. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Northern Planning meeting held on the 6th of April 2021 and May 2021. Do I have a proposer for that?
I propose it. Mark Jones.
Seconder?
Chair, I can second the second one, but I wasn't on the first one.
First one. Just trying to think who was... I'll second it.
Yep.
There you go. Right. Are there any public questions? No. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Has anybody got any pecuniary interest?
Right.
Joyce?
Item 18/03-940/4. There could be perceived to be biased as I am a friend of the applicant.
Thank you. Gerald?
Yes, I'd like to declare an interest.
Could you just
in
take your
my
mask
ward.
off, please, Gerald, when you speak, please?
I'd like to declare an interest because it's in my ward of item number 5, land adjacent to Golf House Lane, Priest Heath.
Thank you.
But also, of course, item 11 is I know you as the applicant. And I'd like just to say that I do know you and it will not play any part in what I have to say.
Okay, he said he won't take any part. Okay, thank you, Gerald. I have an interest in item 6. It's my patch, so I'll speak on it then leave the room. And also on item 11, which is my application, so I'll be leaving the room straight away, okay? And Mark will be taking over from me on both those applications. Thank you. Okay, yeah.
Through you, Chair, for those who've declared that they're a local member for an application, you need to you may speak but step back from the table while the debate takes place. So there is a chair at the side of the wings on each side for the local members who are withdrawing from the table. For those members who've declared an interest in an application, as in either they have a bias because they know the applicant or indeed are the applicant, they need to leave the auditorium, so you'd need to come round to the exit and actually just go into the corridor there, okay?
Thank you, Miranda. Right, so done that, smuggling interests. Right, we'll go straight on to item 5, land adjacent to Golf House Lane, Priest Heath. And Kelvin is presenting this. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of 43 dwelling houses comprising 24 open market dwellings and 19 affordable dwellings, including new vehicular access, public open space and children's play area, landscaping and associated infrastructure on land adjacent to Golf House Lane at Priest Heath. Before I start, I would like to draw your attention to the additional letters schedule relating to this item. There's two entries there. First is that a draft Section 106 agreement, unilateral undertaking, has been submitted, which includes the requirements set out in Parish 7.3 of the committee report. Also, members are requested to note the reason for refusal of the previous application on this site, which was brought to committee in November last year. And it's set out on the schedule there, and I'll refer to that later on in the presentation. The current application is submitted in order to seek to address the concerns relating to open space raised in that reason for refusal. Can we have the first slide, please?
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Just draw your mic a
The
bit
volume's
closer.
quite bad over this side of the room. We can just about hear you.
Sorry, I can't hear.
We can just about hear the officer speaking.
Still can't. Can you take your mask off when you speak, please?
We can just about hear you when you're speaking on this side of the room. It's
Thank
quite
you very
echoey.
much. I was just about to say, Kelvin, could you just bring the mic towards yourself
Yeah.
a bit, please?
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So this slide shows the location of the site, which is the same as the previous refused application. It's located in Priest Heath. There is a mix of surrounding uses, including residential to the south and west, a lorry park to the north, a petrol station, restaurant and convenience store to the east. Next slide. This is the layout plan. It shows the layout of the dwellings, and note on this one that the north is to the right. Sorry, the different plans have got north in a different orientation. As stated, the proposal would include 43 dwellings, of which 24 would be open market and 19 would be affordable. Access would be to the east, which is at the bottom of the drawing, from an existing access point for which improvements would be made. Next slide. This shows the highlighted dwellings are the affordable dwellings dotted around the site. Next slide. These are the elevation plans of the various house sizes. These are the 2-bedroom unit. Next slide. The 3-bedroom unit. Next slide. And the 4-bedroom unit. The houses are traditional brick and tile roof construction, which reflects similar housing designs in Priest Heath. Include covered porches, chimneys to a number of units, modest sized gardens, a minimum of 10 metres in length. Next slide. This is the proposed landscaping of the site. You can see there is landscaping proposed within and around the site. Also, the green area is the open space along the eastern side of the site, which would create a large buffer to the commercial uses to the east and north. There's also, you can see, a footpath link proposed now to the southeast of the site, which would link to Golf House Lane, which runs along the southern part of the drawing. Within the open space, you can see there's a play area as well, and this is shown on the next slide. It's a formal children's play area equipped with the facilities shown. Next slide. This is an aerial photograph which shows the mix of surrounding uses, including an area of common to the southeast of the site, just to the south of the roundabout, which links the A41 and the A49 to the east. Next slides are photographs of the site. The top left shows the existing access, which is via the restaurant and the convenience store from the A49, and then the other slides are taken showing the site as it is at present, and bottom right is Golf House Lane, which is along the southern boundary. Next slide. Further photographs taken from various aspects, showing as well the petrol filling station to the east and the restaurant as well on the bottom right photograph there. Next slide. Yeah, so as I say, this is a resubmission of an application which was refused by the Planning Committee in November last year. This slide shows the difference between the two layouts, the refused one on the left and the current one on the right. The north point is facing to the right on these, so you can see that there is an enhanced and expanded area of open space being proposed, which is on the bottom side of the drawing there. This would seek to address the concerns of committee about the amount of open space being provided. This would have a knock-on effect on the amount of dwellings being proposed. Next slide, please. This is the landscaping strategy for the refused application, showing the amount of green space being proposed along the eastern boundary, and then we can compare this to the current application on the next slide. The current application is on the right-hand side. It shows a increased area of open space along the northeast boundary and also along the southeast side as well, including that footpath link being proposed down to Golf House Lane. Other than that, the layout of the dwellings and road layout is comparable to previously. So, as mentioned, the application seeks to address the reasons for refusal of the previous application. At that time, members acknowledged the additional level of affordable housing being provided, but they did not consider that this outweighed the non-compliance with the open space policy regarding the amount of open space being provided, and they did not consider that the financial contribution in lieu of this was acceptable. The current proposal would provide a significantly greater amount of open space, which would be more or less the amount required under planning policy. This would be a varied mix, including open areas, a formal children's play area, a wildflower meadow and extensive tree planting. This would impact on the amount and mix of housing being provided compared to previously. There would be a reduction in number of properties from 48 to 43, and this would include a reduction in the number of affordable dwellings. However, the proportion being provided of affordables would significantly exceed the amount that will be required under planning policy. The applicant is also willing to pay a financial contribution for education of £120,000 in relation to the 19 affordable dwellings, which ordinarily would not be required, and also a financial contribution of £3,500 to the Priest Heath Common Butterfly Conservation Group for ecology mitigation in relation to the SSSI. It's considered that the proposal is of an acceptable design within the community cluster of Priest Heath, where and would provide significant benefits which would outweigh concerns over the number of overall dwellings being provided. Officers consider that the revised layout has satisfactorily addressed the previous reason for refusal relating to the amount of open space being provided on site, and therefore it is recommended that planning permission is granted subject to conditions and to the Section 106 agreement. This is subject to Natural England confirming they have no objections to the proposal. They were consulted and the consultation expiry is the 17th of June 2021, so we officers feel that the recommendations should be subject to, if members are minded to approve the development, it's subject to no objections being received within that 21-day consultation period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelvin. Right, we do have public speakers. We have speakers on this one, which we'll move to now. But before we do, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And with 30 seconds to go, Miranda will show you a sign. 30 seconds to go. But Gerald, yes?
As member chairman, I can speak on this, can't I?
Yes, you can, yeah. You're down to speak second, Gerald. So the first speaker is Stephen Power for the Parish Council. Can Stephen go wherever you're supposed to go? I'm not quite sure.
To the lectern, Chair.
Oh, I got you, yeah. Right, Stephen, you understand you've got 3 minutes and 30-second warning, okay?
Sure. Okay. Whitchurch Rural Parish Council strongly object to this application at this location. Probably one of the worst that could be considered for a development of this kind, which with predominantly 3-bedroom properties would primarily target families with children. Think about it. Directly on the A49 trunk road and adjacent to the very busy A49-A41 junction a mere 100 metres away. Directly next to a 24-hour fuel station lit up like Blackpool illuminations at night, yet no consideration regarding light pollution. Directly adjacent to a transport cafe with day and overnight lorry parking, creating both noise and airborne pollutants from the trucks, yet no consideration about airborne pollutants. The noise survey presented by the developer is totally unrepresentative, carried out in March 2018 from approximately lunchtime on the 28th to lunchtime on the 29th. One single 24-hour period. This would not have included the noisy weekly motorcycle meetings held at the Raven Cafe on Thursday evenings and Sunday daytime, nor would it have taken into account the Parachute Club aircraft operated from the active airfield just across the road, as there were no aircraft movements on that day. This can be a 6-day-a-week operation. Despite these emissions, noise levels in the open were still measured at 57 dB, which is higher than the World Health Organization maximum suggested limits. Undoubtedly, actual noise levels will be in excess of those measured. Whilst mitigation solutions can be applied, a 2-metre high acoustic fence, for instance, will do nothing to stop noise from above or from many high-level HGV exhaust stacks and refrigeration units. The vehicle movement survey was also unrepresentative in that it was carried out over a period of less than a single week and didn't take into account Fridays or weekends, which are especially busy in the spring and summer months. Strange, isn't it, that both these surveys managed to avoid the busiest and noisiest times? I wonder why. The site has extremely infrequent public transport links with no buses at night or Sundays. Most journeys will therefore be by car, leading to much increased traffic movements on a very busy trunk road. Children and families trying to go out for a walk to, say, Brown Moss would need to cross a 70-mile-an-hour dual carriageway, the same speed as our motorway network, but who in their right mind would risk life and limb trying that? Children walking or cycling to the high school in Whitchurch will be faced with exactly the same situation. Walking to the junior school in Tilstock will be equally hazardous, down a winding country lane with no footpath and no lighting.
30 seconds.
Whilst many authorities are trying to separate vehicles from people due to the effects of pollution, we are considering here putting them in the midst of it. To sum up, allowing this development to proceed will create future misery for many unsuspecting buyers and community as a whole. We live there, we know the area, please listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. Right, now we have a local member, Gerald Dakin, who has 5 minutes to speak if he needs it. Okay, Gerald?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Members, this is a huge increase in this area for development. Previous to this application, Priest Heath had made provision for only 5 new dwellings in the new local plan, and they've yet to be built. This was regarded as about right for this area. I understand the reason for affordable housing, and I agree with the applicant's method and find it highly commendable, but not in this area. This area is a semi-industrial site with transport cafes, HGV and car parking overnight, and up to 40 to 50 vehicles parked here, some using engines to keep the refrigerations cool, and other noises are made. Twice a week there are motorcycle groups using these facilities on Thursday and Sunday. In excess of 150 motorcycles, and this at present causes little difficulty. But adjoining these proposed sites will cause difficulty for the people living there and the new housing site. This area is served by 2 very busy transport links, the A41 and the A49, and it's a natural place for transport and HGV services, and has for many years been that. But this proposed site could well be put into jeopardy with noise and movements being incompatible with housing and jeopardising some old and very good businesses and possible lots of local jobs. The Parish Council sent in a very good report, and we've heard the Chairman of the Parish Council speak today. I am in total agreement with their comments. The people buying these homes will be getting bricks and mortar value for money, but not a place that you would choose to live, and I feel certain these prospective residents would prefer to live much closer to a town rather than a semi-industrial site, and I would ask the committee to emphasise with them. I feel certain that prospective purchasers will have young families, and the children would prefer to have better facilities and recreation prospects, like those supplied by larger communities. I believe this area should be left as it is, as an HGV industrial estate, and put this excellent development somewhere else more suitable for housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Gerald, for that. Okay, we have four is the agent, Hayley Knight. Would you like to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes, Hayley. We'll indicate when you've got 30 seconds left, okay?
Thanks, yeah, perfect. Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for this opportunity today. As a planning officer presented, a similar application was considered by this committee in November. At that committee, members expressed support for the Gleeson approach to house building. To recap, Gleeson specialise in the provision of entry-level housing aimed at first-time buyers, giving customers at the lower end of the market a chance to buy their own home. We take care in determining selling prices that are affordable to as many local people as possible by consulting the government's annual survey of hours and earnings for an area to ensure selling prices are affordable to at least 90% of working local couples. In addition, Gleeson offer a wide range of incentives and support packages to prospective homeowners to help them achieve home ownership. Housing affordability is a significant issue in Shropshire, one which we believe we can assist in addressing now. Since the refusal of the earlier application, we've taken on board your comments and reason for refusal, which related to a lack of on-site open space. As such, this revised application reduces the number of new homes and increases the on-site open space, which includes an equipped play area for a range of play facilities for children of all ages. This now ensures compliance with policy MG2 as set out in your reports. The scheme before you today therefore provides 3,848 square metres of open space. That's an increase of over 1,800 square metres, with play facilities and landscaping to ensure a variety of open spaces are provided. 43 new homes are proposed, 19 of which will be subject to a clear price cap, as agreed with your affordable housing officers, albeit please note all of the homes will be 20% less than comparable local house prices. The package of benefits will also include a SIL contribution of nearly £300,000, education contribution as set out by your officers, £3,500 for the Butterfly Conservation Group to offset any potential ecological impact of the common, provision of leaflets setting out the importance of the common and how we can all minimise our impact upon it, and provision and maintenance and emptying of 2 dog waste bins within the scheme for the lifetime of the development. Overall, we've worked hard with your officers to ensure issues have been addressed fully. We trust that you recognise this and see this development as an opportunity to provide a new type of much-needed affordable homes in the Whitchurch rural area. Gleeson are all about low-cost home ownership.
You have 30 seconds left.
They don't sell to landlords and in fact include no rental covenants without express approval for a minimum of 5 years in the sale contracts with their customers. It is our hope, particularly in these difficult times, a predominantly first-time buyer-led, low-cost home ownership scheme will be supported by members.
Thank you, Hayley. Okay, I'm just going to move to the officer now again to see if you've got any comments to bring to the table before we open for debate.
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Okay, right. Thank you. Now we can open it for debate. Who would like to go first? Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I remember when this was first debated by the committee, and I remember that there was a lot of praise for the developer producing a plan for affordable homes, but feeling that the outline plan as it was then was not good enough because it didn't provide for enough recreational space. And I think the developer has come back and actually dealt with the objections we had to their original application. They have provided more open space, they provide a play area, and I think it would be very difficult for us to refuse this, given that our principal objection to it in the first instance was on the lack of open space. I also have to say that I know that in rural areas there is a great problem with the lack of affordable homes, and this scheme does provide for affordable homes, unfortunately fewer than the original application, but nevertheless it is a scheme providing for affordable homes. And although I hear the concerns of the local parish council and local member, I think that on the whole, I think we should be backing the officer's recommendation, because of course there is consultation with Natural England which haven't been resolved and which need to be resolved, and obviously we need to get the officers to review that when it comes back. I'd just like to ask, I mean, if we were to refuse this, would be a very difficult decision to defend, I think, given our original objection to the first application. I wonder if there's some advice on that might be in order.
Thank you, David. Calvin, you give us any advice on that? It would be hard to...
I think the application was debated at committee last year, and the various issues were considered in depth at that time, and there was a number of concerns raised by members, but ultimately the reason for refusal was the one which is in the additional letters schedule, and that only related to open space requirements. To be fair to the applicant, they've clearly looked at that reason for refusal and have concentrated on seeking to address that particular matter, which was set out formally by the council, and therefore, whilst members could raise new matters, I think that our advice would be that we concentrate on the matters that were included in the previous reason for refusal, which was the lack of open space.
Thank you, Kelvin.
Chair.
David, just want to come back.
Yeah, thanks for that advice. Now, I think on the basis of that advice, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation on this.
That's okay. We've got other speakers to go first, so we'll just hold that thought for a second, David. Jeff, you indicated.
Thank you. I have grave concerns about this because when you actually read it, it is rather worrying. Has anybody considered the impact on the existing businesses? How are they going to survive if they're surrounded by houses that within a few years' time are going to be moaning and complaining about smells and light pollution and so on? And I think we should listen to Whitchurch Council, because I believe, from what I'm reading, that they've taken those views on board. I'm also worried about when you read paragraphs such as windows need to be kept closed and so on. Is that the right and proper place and the right standard for someone to live? I just think we were doing injustice. Maybe we do need houses that are affordable, but this is a semi-industrial site. It's not a residential site, and I don't believe it should be considered as a residential site, and I think it will have an effect on the use of its existing neighbours and community. So I would not like to see this passed whatsoever.
Thank you, Jeff. Joyce, you indicated.
Yes, please. The proposal doesn't meet the requirements of CS6.
Joyce, could you just take your mask off, please? It's a bit mumbled.
Oh, this. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me better now?
That's better, yeah.
Sorry, I do apologise. The proposal doesn't meet the requirements of CS6 as it is inappropriate in scale, density and pattern in the context of this setting. And the allocation for homes in Samdev until 2026, in which Prees Heath is part of a community cluster, is for 10 houses, so I would therefore say this was overdevelopment of this site. Shropshire Council Ecology recommend refusal, as there could be an adverse effect on the integrity of brown moss. 4.1.11 in the report, regulatory services class this as a noisy environment. Closing windows is not a solution. The noise assessment for the proposal indicates that many of the windows in the development would need to be kept closed at all times to achieve acceptable internal noise levels. This application doesn't meet the aims of the NPPF. Development of this size is likely to result in significant adverse impact. We should be protecting Crees Heath site of special scientific interest, and it lies within an impact risk zone. Any change to this environment could put the nationally scarce silver-studded blue butterfly in severe danger. We are the protectors of this environment, and we should do all we can to protect it for future generations. Careless dog owners leaving feces from their dogs are changing the soil composition, so therefore increasing the number of dog walkers to the area can only be bad. Dog bins do not solve problems. Ask anybody who lives in an area where people walk their dogs. So I think advocating this to people through leaflets, about how to behave in the countryside in special areas like this doesn't work. People totally ignore it. So I have one question I would like to ask, and as you can probably guess, I'm actually against this application. And my question is, have any readings been done on traffic fumes?
Okay. Kelvin, can I come to you that, please? Did you hear that? Have you got any movements on traffic, Joyce, was it?
Traffic fumes.
Fumes.
Fumes. F-U-M-E-S.
Fumes. Have we got any survey on traffic fumes in the area? Please, Kelvin.
I'm not aware of any, no, no, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I come back, please, Chair? Isn't that vitally important? Can I come back? Oh. Can I come back, please?
Yep.
Isn't it vitally important that we know what the health risks are in this area, and as it is heavily populated by vehicles all day, every day, isn't that an important factor? Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, Edward.
Thank you, Chair. I come at this with a pair of fresh eyes, a bit like Councillor Elner does, I think. And I have some knowledge of this area, having been brought up in the locality. I have sympathy with what you're saying, Councillor Basma, over this is a much improved plan. It's improved over the original thing. But I think two things stand out clearly to me. Joyce, you've mentioned the fumes. Well, in Wem, we have a street that we have been watching very closely with nitrous oxide, and this is certainly as intensive as a Wem street, knowing the lorry park and all those things there, and I'd like that investigated. The second thing that comes to mind that's important to me is we're talking about affordable homes here, and that inevitably or usually means people starting out in life with young families, and that means schooling, and that means getting to Whitchurch or to Tilstock, and so connectivity to me is not good here. It's down a very busy road, and until those issues are addressed, I feel, even though with these improvements in place, I don't think it satisfies what young families need to have in bringing up children, and so I would be minded to say no to this again.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep.
It's. I must admit that the person 2 cubicles down, I do agree with him that the sound system is not particularly helpful. The PA, it's difficult to keep up with things. I'm sorry, I won't keep you. I wanted to refer to page 27 of the report. It's 6.3.19, and it relates to the affordable housing element that's in there. I'd be grateful for some. I'm a little anxious about this altogether. It looks to me as a way potentially of circumventing, well, cosmetically appearing to provide affordable housing, but that very swiftly will be consumed into market housing. I was wondering if there could be a bit more clarification of how this scheme will operate. It will not remain at 20% below the market value. The Affordable Home Housing team have indicated that it will therefore be necessary to monitor the values of the homes over the coming years. I'm a little anxious about that because the housing team will be looking at to ascertain whether this model would be suitable to be adopted by Shropshire Council as a whole, and that makes me very anxious. Actually, I was wondering if I could have some clarification on exactly the mechanics of this, please.
Okay, thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Kelvin, could you?
It is referred to in part 6.3.19.
Sorry, I can't. Could you drag it a bit closer, please, Kevin? Sorry.
It is referred to in, is that better? In 6.3.19 that it is a new model that's being proposed by Gleeson, and it's a model which the council is keen to understand whether it does work. I think you'll see on 6.3.18 that in terms of the definition of affordable housing, it says that schemes do not benefit from public grant funding do not need to be subject to provisions for the homes to remain an affordable house for future eligible households. That's the national definition of affordable dwellings, and therefore they are defined for the purposes of this application as affordable. However, yes, I do acknowledge that there is that concern, but at the end of the day, they are defined as affordable dwellings.
It's a bit of a nonsense, if you don't mind my saying so.
I think, Chair, the expectation is that that because of the model that's being put forward, that the expectation is that there wouldn't be resale to the level that might be anticipated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelvin. There's nobody else indicating. I'm going back to David because he did put a proposal forward. David, do you want? Sorry, Mark, can't see you there.
Mark Jones. Yeah, I was on the planning committee when we refused this back in November, and the Gleesons have come back and amended the plan. The site is in the planning zone, and they've done the open spaces better than we said before, and I do feel there is a need for housing in that area for people in Whitchurch. The youngsters coming up can't afford getting the housing ladder. My son's not living in Whitchurch, but he's just paying £750 a month for a rented house. It shows you what the youngsters are up against. There's nobody in Whitchurch giving free land out to build houses on for cheap houses for our youngsters. So I think it isn't the best site in the world, but it looks like it's the site that we're going to have. So I would second David Vasmer's recommendation.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just coming back to this. Sorry, man.
You'll need to make clear it's subject to natural reason, no objection.
Yeah.
Because that is a valid point.
Okay. Calvin, coming to Calvin, could you just comment on some of the comments that Joyce made about the ecology, etc.?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the consultation response of the Council's ecology team, clearly the application has now been amended from the previous refused one in terms of providing additional open space and therefore reducing the level of impact that might be associated with occupants using neighbouring pieces of open space such as the common. The ecologists have not objected to the application. They've recommended a number of conditions to mitigate for any ecological impact, and these are included in the planning conditions put forward in the report. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that that whilst we haven't received the formal comments of Natural England as yet, they did comment on the previous scheme, albeit that their comments didn't come forward until after the application was refused. But their formal comments were that they raised no objection to the application, subject to the appropriate mitigation being secured, i.e. the conditions which were included in the report and also the provisions within the Section 106 unilateral undertaking. So subject to those comments from Natural England coming forward again with no objection, then there isn't any ecological objection to the application subject to those mitigation measures being included in the decision notice. I think in relation to the noise levels, I think the Parish Council may have referred to 2 metre high fencing. The fencing being proposed at the most sensitive parts of the site are 3 metres high. There's also clearly an additional buffer now because of the larger piece of open space along that eastern boundary, which will provide natural noise attenuation in addition to the technical measures within the houses themselves in terms of ventilation and double glazing, and also the attenuation provided by the fencing. Thank you, Chair.
Does that satisfy any of yours? Joyce just indicated.
It sort of balances out more, thank you, Chair. But what I would say, what about the traffic fumes? I'm just so aware of the amount of traffic that goes along that road. It cannot be healthy. And if I can also add, whilst I'm speaking, I think it was £3,500 has been paid to mitigate the issues with brown moss. It's brown moss, isn't it? 3,500, and that sounds very much like blackmail money to me, because it wasn't all right, but now they're giving 3,500. It is all right. I know it isn't blackmail money, but that's what it sounds like. So I think the traffic fume issue is a big issue. There is no way I can vote for this the way it stands at the moment, particularly around the environment, having to have your windows closed. I know what you're saying, but there's still an issue about noise. So therefore, I'm still very much in the same position I was in before. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joyce. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm brand new to this planning, so forgive me if I don't get my facts quite correct. If we're going to refuse this application on the grounds of noise or pollution or otherwise, we're effectively saying that this whole site cannot be used for residential development, because whether you build one house or 50 houses on it, that one house out of 50 houses is still going to have the same noise pollution or the same problems with fumes, etc. By the same token, we're talking about the land around being affected by people walking their dogs, etc. Sorry, I thought I turned that off. Apologies. So it boils down to the fact that if the land is acceptable as residential land, then we can't object to it being so close to A49, or the fact that the residents will use the surrounding land for the benefit of their lifestyles. So the issue comes down to, is the land suitable for residential or is it not, as opposed to the amount of dwellings on the land. So I think if we refuse it today, then we have to make a separate decision on whether the land is actually suitable for residential development or not.
Thank you, Gary. I mean, this land is, a big percentage is affordable. The reason why it's affordable is because where it is.
Yeah.
Basically. That's the nut of it. Any more speakers? I'm going back to David in a minute for his proposal. No more? Anybody want to say anything else? I'm going back to David to clarify. You want to propose this for approval?
Yeah, I'm proposing the officer's recommendation as outlined in the report.
And
I'll second it.
Mark seconded it. So in that case, we can go to the vote, Miranda? Yeah. So right, all those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Chair. I have
5 against.
1, 2, 3. Chair, I have 3.
3.
Do you have
Any abstentions? Ted.
1.
Thank you. So that's gone with the officer's recommendation. It's been passed, yes. Right, so now we go to item... Hang on. Where are we? Item
6, Chair.
Item 6, put my glasses on, might help. Local needs dwelling, which is in my patch. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now to chair this one, okay?
Okay, who's the lead officer on this one? Kelvin? Would you like to go ahead? And then we've got speakers. We've got the Parish Council. Won't say Parish Council are going to speak. I presume they're here. And then Paul's going to speak. And then the agents are going to speak as well. So Calvin can kick off, please.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. This is an application for the erection of a single-storey local needs dwelling, including new access and detached garage on land to the northwest of New Street Lane Farm near Market Drayton. I draw your attention to the additional letters schedule again. The Committee report refers to a heritage assessment being required. This has now been submitted by the applicant's agent, described as a historic impact assessment. It was only submitted a few days ago, and there has been insufficient opportunity for the Council's conservation team to provide their comments on it, and I'll refer to this later on in the presentation. First slide, please. So the application is located within an enclosed plot to the at the corner of a field to the northwest of New Street Lane Farm, shown on the plan. There are 2 other nearby houses to the north, a pair of semi-detached properties as shown. However, the location is rural and within the countryside. Next slide. This is the layout plan. It shows the layout in relation to New Street Lane Farm to the south east. The farmhouse at the farm, which is the northernmost building on that plot, is a Grade 2 listed building. Next slide. The dwelling would be an L-shaped single-storey property having 2 bedrooms, open plan kitchen, dining and living area, and a utility and detached garage as shown. Next slide. These are the proposed elevations. The design has now been revised following officer comments to try to replicate a single-storey barn structure, more in keeping with its proximity to the listed building. These include the bullseye window, the arched brick lintels and the barn doors. Next slide. These are the photos of the site. It is a grassed enclosed field on the corner of a larger field. Next slide. And the next one. And you can see the general open and rural nature of the site. Next slide. And this is the view from the crossroads. Next slide. And this is the view of the farmhouse, which is a Grade 2 listed building. So the application is for a local needs dwelling, and the Council's affordable housing team have confirmed that the applicants do meet the criteria for such housing in terms of their need, their strong local connections to the area and their personal circumstances. And this is set out in more detail in 4.1.2 of the report. The application also refers to the agricultural need of the dwelling to allow the continuation of the family farming business, but the description of the application is for a local needs dwelling. Officers have 2 principal issues: the location of the site and also the impact of the dwelling on the nearby listed building. In terms of the location, planning policy allows for local needs dwellings in the countryside. However, these policies do require that the dwellings are in or adjoining a settlement. In this case, officers do not consider that the site is within or adjoining a settlement, and its location is therefore contrary to planning policy. The historic assessment, which has now been submitted, suggests that the proposed design reflects the nearby barns and that other farmsteads in the area have seen development of paddock, often nearby or opposite the farmstead, and as such it concludes that the proposed siting of the dwelling would not adversely affect the immediate setting of the New Street Lane farm or the wider historic setting of the area. Although the Council's conservation team have not had sufficient opportunity to review this assessment, they have said in their concerns, which are set out in the report, that they do have particular issues with its design and its proximity. The historic assessment states that the applicants are willing to work with the Council's conservation team on the detailed elements of the design and fenestration. However, officers do consider that in its present form, the proposal raises design issues that, even if these are addressed, the proposal would still represent a contrived form of development which would impact the character and setting of the listed building and would result in less than substantial harm to the listed building. You'll see in paragraph 4.1.3 that the Conservation Officer states that the proposal would create harm to the character and setting of the listed building. Therefore, officers recommend that planning permission is refused on the grounds that the proposal is contrary to the location criteria for local needs dwellings. This is notwithstanding the fact that it has been accepted that the applicants are in need, as set out in development plan policy, and due to its adverse impact on the setting of the adjacent Grade 2 listed building. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, there's no speaker from the Morton Say Parish, but Miranda has got a statement. Miranda, is that true?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not timing this as I read it, as it's a word limit for those who've put in a written statement instead of coming to speak themselves. So, Morton Say Parish Council fully supports this planning application for these long-standing parish residents. Shropshire Council have adopted planning policy that supports affordable housing on suitable sites in the open countryside, subject to there being an identified local need and/or an essential agricultural need. Core Strategy Policy CS5, Countryside and Greenbelt, supports affordable housing to meet local need, including agricultural workers' dwellings. SAMDEV Policy MD7A, Managing Housing Development in the Countryside, includes provisions for single-plot affordable dwellings and agricultural workers' dwellings to address an essential need. These applicants have both an agricultural and a local need. Regarding the agricultural need, paragraph 3.2 of Shropshire Council's Type and Affordability of Housing SPD states, consideration may be given to business cases which support farmers with a family connection seeking to retire on the farm if an advantage to the business continuity can be proven and the property is treated on a similar footing to an affordable dwelling. National policy also recognises the importance of suitable housing for retiring farmers in the Government Planning Practice Guidance, revised in July 2019. It advises that it may be relevant to take into account when applying paragraph 79A of the NPPF. Evidence of the necessity for a rural worker to live at or in close proximity to their place of work to ensure the effective operation of an agricultural, forestry or similar land-based rural enterprise, for instance where farm animals or agricultural processes require on-site attention 24 hours a day, and where otherwise there would be a risk to human or animal health, or from crime, or to deal quickly with emergencies that could cause serious loss of crops or products. The degree to which there is confidence that the enterprise will remain viable for the foreseeable future, and whether the provision of an additional dwelling on site is essential for the continued viability of a farming business through the farm succession process. The information outlined in the agricultural need assessment demonstrates that this agricultural business is financially viable, requires essential personnel to reside on site, and recognises the need for an additional dwelling to aid the succession process. Regarding the local need, the Council agrees with the statements within the memo from Shropshire Council's Communities and Housing Policy team, which confirms that the applicants meet all the criteria required for this proposed affordable housing and local need. Regarding the design and siting near the Grade 2 listed farmhouse, the Parish Council agreed that the revised drawings put together by the architect who oversees much of the work undertaken on the neighbouring Clovelly and Shavington estates and replicating a single-storey barn structure are more in keeping with the adjacent Grade 2 listed farmhouse. The applicants have also indicated that if the permission were granted, they could work with Shropshire Council to find a mutually agreeable design. We would urge the Planning Committee to support this farming family to secure the future of their business. That's the end of that statement, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Paul's got 5 minutes. I hope it's not going to take 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be taking 5 minutes. Thank you very much. To be a local needs dwelling or a farm workers dwelling, it has been proven by the affordable housing team it's acceptable. Putting a bit more on it, this is a genuine reason. His daughter wants to take over the farm, has a young family. He is still well involved with the farm. We have a sucking herd of 130 cows, I believe. It's not a dairy farm anymore. I was a dairy farmer for 40 years, so I do sympathise with this. The daughter wants to take over the farm, carry on, and her son there on after. This doesn't happen very often now. Small farms have been taken over by the bigger ones and they've developed the housing, etc. But to keep small farms, I think it's very important. Family-run businesses, which isn't that profitable, but it's a way of life, and I really think we ought to be keeping that sort of lifestyle. The welfare of the stock, the father, experienced, obviously, the daughter's just come into it. He wants to be there, to be carving these cows and helping his daughter for many years to come. He's still got plenty of years left of work in him. I do know the family. The position of the house has been debatable. The planning officer was talking about going behind the farm, but behind the farm, the lagoon's there, the mixon's there, it's still by a road. These are all minor roads, remember. It's still by a road, and it wouldn't be suitable in my eyes. Where they're asking for it to be is across the road on the other side, in an area about 0.3 of an acre, so it's a small patch of land, which years ago, I was told the other day, was an orchard to the farm. The trees aren't there anymore, but the hedges are well mature, hundreds of years old, this hedge. It's a well mature, 6-8 foot high. It's a good screening straight away. The house, they've changed the house design to the planning officer's not recommendation, but approves it more because it's in keeping, it's more of a farm building rather than just a bungalow. It looks like a farm building off the road. You won't be able to see much of it anyway. There are houses opposite and further up the road as well, so it doesn't stand on its own, it really doesn't. And this crossroad, it's a crossroad, so road that way, then, and that way. I think it lends itself well to it. What else have I got down? Thinking about the future, if it wasn't needed to be a farm workers dwelling or local need, or if they didn't need the house, it was a local need house, putting it behind the farm, which is acceptable to the planning officers, wouldn't be acceptable to a local needs person with a mixin and slurry lagoon there. And I'm back with what the Parish Council says, raising their points as well. I really feel quite strongly this is a really genuine farm workers, affordable house, whatever it is. Local needs dwelling. It's in between really, local need and farm workers dwelling. So I hope you can support this. It's a genuine reason. I shall let you debate further on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the agent Peter Richards in the house? Is he here, Miranda? Oh, he's there. Lovely. Thank you, Peter. You have 3 minutes, and Miranda will be waving furiously when there's 30 seconds left.
Okay. Members of the Planning Committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon and ask you to support this application for a local need dwelling. Applicants Rob and Alison Yeomans are in need of an affordable home suited to Alison's medical need. Due to a degenerative back condition, she will soon be confined to a wheelchair. And after assessing all other options, it's evident they require a single-storey home close to their farm. Operating a family farm, Rob needs to be on hand to manage livestock and assist his daughter, who is gradually taking on the running of the farm, and who alongside her family will move into the farmhouse. Therefore, the Council's in Housing Enabling Team have confirmed the applicant's housing need. The applicants and the family work hard without the help of external labour in sustaining their beef rearing farm. An amended house type design has been prepared during the consideration of this application, aimed at replicating a converted barn, thus respecting the surroundings and while still affording a home suitable for a disabled person. It is noted that the Build Conservation Officer recognises the amended design is an improvement. However, their concerns are noted and the applicants are willing to amend the design further to address these concerns if the site is considered suitable this afternoon. Please be advised that whilst a heritage assessment has been recently submitted, which affords commentary behind the design and assesses the impact of the character of the area, a heritage professional will also be employed to inform the design if the proposed site is considered acceptable. The central issue in the consideration of this application is a suggestion by the planners that this application is contrary to policy, as it will not be located within or adjoining a recognised settlement. However, planning judgment needs to be applied. Located in between Market Drayton and Calver Hall, New Street Lane is a recognised hamlet, which is labelled on the Ordnance Survey. Within the officer's report, it reiterates national policy that local authorities should support opportunities for rural exception housing that meets an identified need, plus the Council's own core strategy allows for local need housing in or adjoining settlements of all sizes. Shropshire's SPD encourages the suitability of a site to be assessed on its own merits and affords the opportunity to view proposals for rural affordable housing positively, and does not provide a definitive definition in terms of what constitutes a suitable site. When considered in the context of the surrounding area, the proposed site is logical, will complement the spatial pattern and address an identified need. We would ask this application is supported as it is in accordance with the Council's own SPD, policies CS5, CS6, MD2 and MD7A, and we welcome a deferment to allow us to design to be further improved and the section 106 to be finalised. Can I also add that as in applying for a local need dwelling as opposed to an agricultural need, it's effectively the same purpose. All affordable agricultural need dwellings are now dual as local need.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you've made your point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we open up the floor, I don't know who would like to speak on this. Can't see it. Mr. Towers over there, please.
Thank you. Just briefly to comment on the fact, I have direct personal experience of the situation of a farming family in the days of North Shropshire District Council when we had exactly the same issue happening. I sympathise totally with the ongoing business that has to be maintained of a family farm.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jeff Elner.
I'd like to, I don't know if I'm allowed to propose or not, but I would like to definitely suggest that we do defer any decision on this to give the applicant time to address the concerns. It's a single-storey building. I don't know if the farmhouse occupants are complaining or not. The parish council are in support, the highways are in support, ecology is in support. The only thing that's lacking is a heritage impact statement. So if the applicant is prepared to work to obtain something that is more suitable for that site, then I think we should give them the opportunity, bearing in the social needs of this application. And I would propose that we defer it to give them time to do just that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Barrow.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to support this application for all of the reasons that Councillor Wynne put forward, and also the Parish Council, who are totally in support of this. So I will, I'm afraid, on this one be going against officer recommendation.
Sorry, Joyce, I didn't hear a word you said.
Oh, didn't you? Did anyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, I'll try again. I'll talk
That's
louder.
better.
My husband's always telling me to be quieter. Oh, of course, sorry. Because it's clear, I can't see it. I said, for all the reasons put forward by Councillor Wynne and the Parish Council, I will not be going with the officer's recommendation on this. I will be supporting the application as it stands. I'm going against officer recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Councillor Dakin was next, and then I'll take Councillor Clark afterwards. So, Gerald, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered now, looking at the buildings, looking at the picture at the front of here, we see where the cluster of farm buildings is. We see a spot where the new building is going to be. What is that, those two? Is that a dwelling to the north of there?
Calvin, can you help with that question?
Sorry, can I ask Councillor to repeat the question, please?
Yes. Looking at the map we've got on our papers here, it shows where the farmstead is now, it shows the crossroads, and it shows where the new dwelling is going to be. What are those dwellings, or are they dwellings to the north of the grid reference here?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chairman. Yeah, can we move the slide back, please, to the location plan, which is number 22?
Yes.
Yeah, you see there's two properties, a pair of semi-detached properties just to the north. Yeah, there's two dwellings there.
So that's part of the area, obviously, isn't it? So I don't see any. If the houses on the other side of the road, it helps to the cluster, and I think having this single dwelling, which looks rather like a barn, just by there, fills in quite well, and I have no problem with this at all.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Clark is next.
Thank you, Chair, if you can hear me. Sorry, it's very brief. I should have picked it up earlier, really. I'm just making a voice to say I support or I second the proposal that the matter should be deferred for the reasons outlined by my colleague here on the left, here on the right. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Miranda, I need guidance, obviously.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I hear what members are saying, but I think there's just something that we just need to focus on here, because you've got the recommendation before you that the officer recommendation is that the actual location is not in accordance with planning policy because it needs to be in or adjacent to a named settlement. I hear that there's a proposal to defer to let the applicant work with officers regarding the design and the heritage issues, but I think you also heard the applicant's agent who was saying that they would do that if the actual location was deemed acceptable. So I think members do need to apply their minds to the issue as to whether this location in fact meets planning policy. Now, a little bit of confusion may have come into the consideration here because there's been a discussion of this as both a rural workers, agricultural workers dwelling and a local needs dwelling. Well, in our policies, those are different. So, you know, this application has been presented to you as an affordable dwelling. So if it was not required by this particular applicant, then it would be affordable in perpetuity and could be sold to any other applicant who met that housing need and wasn't necessarily connected with that farmstead. So the policy has been set out for you in your officer report. And the type and affordability of housing, SPD, does give us some very good guidance around what is a settlement and what is deemed to be in or adjacent to a named settlement. So, for example, in that SPD, it says a settlement always comprises a group of houses occupied by households from different families. The group becomes a settlement due to the number and proximity of the houses in the group. So you've got the officer recommendation before you that this is in fact not a named settlement, either loose-knit or a tight-knit settlement, because we do have places in Shropshire where there are more dispersed settlements, and that is accepted. So it's this question I think members need to apply their minds to here today, because even if you were to defer this application, that matter needs addressing. And it would be probably unfair on the applicant to suggest they go away and work on the design if they were then going to come back to committee and members were going to decide that from a location point of view it's unacceptable. So I would ask members to apply their minds to that point before you then consider the heritage point.
Councillor Elner?
Am I understanding that you're suggesting that it's feasible that we could propose to accept this application on the terms that it will comply with a heritage impact statement in the future, or not?
I think through you, Chair, what you need to remember, councillors, is you have the application you have before you with the design that you have and the comments you have from the conservation areas. From the conservation officers. So, if there's any questions around the design, then that might be something you'd need to defer that point on if you felt that more work was required on the design of it. But what you can't really do is approve something that you don't know what it's going to look like, because you've got before you today.
I support it then.
Councillor Barrow?
I'd like to move that we support this application, Chair.
Have we got a seconder for that?
I'd like to second it now.
Who was that?
I would second that we support it.
Councillor Elner wants to second it. Is that okay, Miranda? Or do you need...
Can I clarify? Thank you. Okay. I am going against officer recommendation, and I am going for support that this application is accepted. Thank you. Does that help? No.
Through you, Chair, sorry, we need to understand what the conclusions that you're proposing and the reasons for your proposal. If it's against the officer recommendation, then there needs to be a reason for the proposal that is understandable in terms of the application and the planning policy you have before you. So your proposal, Councillor Barrow, needs to explain what your conclusions you're drawing in relation to the main issues of this application.
Okay.
Chair.
Right. Okay. I'm going
Councillor Isherwood?
Thank you. Does the solicitor, Miranda, have a view on the Braintree case that was that's on the planning register? There's a document on the planning register about a court case in Braintree that I think the judges decided in favour of the applicant in a similar situation where there was doubt as to whether it was a settlement or not, or whether the local needs outweighed the policy on over whether it was close enough to a settlement. Do you have any advice to give us on that?
Not specifically, Councillor, because I think you've got to look at this policy and this settlement. You're applying, what you've got to do is interpret the planning policy you have before you, which is Shropshire Council's policy, obviously not the policy that was in issue in that case, and then reach some conclusions as to whether you consider that this is in or adjacent to a named settlement. And that's where your planning judgment comes in. You've got to interpret the policy correctly, and then you apply the policy to the facts you have before you. So you've got evidence before you in terms of the plans and the photographs and the officer's advice, and you've heard from the parish council and you've heard from the applicant's agent. So you need to reach a conclusion as to whether you accept or not that this actual site is within or adjacent to a named settlement. There is advice within our SPD, because you can have loose-knit and dispersed settlements, and also more nuclear tight-knit settlements. So you need to look at the evidence you have before you. The planning officer may be able to give you further advice about that, but that's the sort of process. So understand the policy and apply it to the facts that you have before you.
Okay, can I bring Calvin in on the settlement issue, please? We've had lots of pictures of rural land around the buildings.
Thank you. Yes, the members that have seen the plan shown and the location and its rural nature. It lies within the countryside. Officers are of the view that it doesn't fall within a named settlement, either in or adjacent to adjoining a named settlement. And there are two other properties other than the farmhouse nearby, but there are no other properties in proximity to the particular site. If members feel that the site does lie within a settlement, then I think they should explain why they take a different view to officers, in coming to that view and in considering that it does comply with the location policies, contrary to the officer's view that it doesn't comply to the locational policies for local needs dwellings.
It's fairly clear to me that he's got a fairly modelled planning application now, and I think the only thing we can do is refuse it. But I'll take Councillor Vasmer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to bring members' attention to paragraph 6.1.4 on page 62, and where the officer argues that there's some buildings and along New Street Lane, to the northwest, along New Street Lane, and which can be regarded as settlement. And couldn't these properties here, near where the development is proposed, be considered part of that settlement? I mean, in many rural areas, there are a large number of buildings often dotted about, which are considered part of a settlement, and people live there, regard them as living in the same area, but they're not physically located so close to each other. So couldn't we argue that the buildings to the northwest along New Street Lane, combined with these, constitute a settlement, and therefore we could approve the application?
Yep.
Yes.
Councillor Towers.
Thank you. Thank you again. We're trying to make sure, it seems to me, that it fits in with current planning policies that Shropshire Council have adopted, and that's what we've been given strong advice on. To me, the need is paramount. It's quite clear that this family, this settlement, needs this support. It needs it on economic grounds, and it needs it on health grounds going forward. So there must be some policy that I haven't seen yet that might give us the strength to say, yeah, this is a right thing to do. And it probably doesn't state it in this paperwork, and I would want to, if that reassures officers that we're in line with what we've already agreed previously in other committees, then that would be fine. But to me, this is the right thing to do, and we have to find the right policy. This is a need that we don't make everything. We have to see the personal in this, not just legislation and policy elsewhere, because the individual is crushed by it. And we need our economy to thrive, and we need these farms to thrive. And they're small family units, and they don't make a lot of money. They're asset rich and cash poor, many of them. It's something they're doing to try and help themselves to continue in this situation. And the handover of a business of this nature to the next generation is really hard. And here we've got some people who are ageing, it seems, who wish to continue to work and offer their services to the farm. It'll help their personal health. They can also be watched over by their family across the road. So it seems to score to me on economic grounds, on health grounds as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we're all very sympathetic, but we've got to go through the planning laws, unfortunately. Councillor Barrow.
Yes, my last words on this. I would argue that it is a settlement. Sorry. It's so clear you don't realise you've got it on. I would argue this is a settlement because of the buildings that are there in proximity to it, though there are not many. I think Kelvin was sort of guiding us in that direction. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think, Richard, you picked up on the things that I've picked up on, which is, firstly, they've demonstrated a local need. We know there's a local need. The family needs support to look after each other. It is continuation of family business for economic purposes. So I think there are compassionate reasons there that actually outweighs all the reasons for refusing this application. My wording may not be very good, Miranda, and maybe you can find better wording for me, I don't know. But I think you know what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, Councillor, so we've had a proposer of David Vasmer and seconded by Joyce. Is that with the valid reason that it's a settlement? Miranda, are you going to take advice on that?
Yeah. Can I speak, please, on this one? It appears to me that, listening here, members are, in general, mindful to support the location. However, there's a lot of cloudy. It's cloudy with regards to historic, and with regards to whether it's agricultural or local needs. They're quite different. With an agricultural workers dwelling, you've got to demonstrate a functional need to be on site. Can I suggest that you consider deferral of this application to get clarification on the issues, and that it comes back to committee once we've got a clearer picture on some of the outstanding issues that have come very clear today?
Well, I think we were there 10 minutes ago, but Miranda said we couldn't do that, so.
Through you, Chair, it was simply we hadn't actually addressed the issue of the location, but I think we've heard from some members around the table that they are inclined to accept that this is in fact in or adjacent to a named settlement.
Okay.
That hasn't really been discussed before, Chair.
Okay, so we had Councillor Elner and Councillor Ted Clark first and second that earlier on. Can we take a vote on that now, or do I need to ask them that again?
Sorry, Chair, was that to a deferral then?
Yes.
If that was the first proposal that you had proposed and seconded, then you can take a vote on that on the basis of a deferral, but with members presumably inclined to accept the idea of the location. Was that what those proposers and seconders were considering?
I think that is true. So we're happy with the area being called a settlement, but we want to defer it just to go through the heritage statement and things like that. So if I could take a vote on that, please.
Sorry, what's the proposal?
The proposal is that we were happy with the settlement, but we're going to defer.
You don't need to.
To defer?
Defer it so they can go through the heritage statement.
You don't have to do it.
This gives them an opportunity.
If I can ask Miranda, please, do we have to go through that? If we agree that it is a settlement, then surely we just take the vote.
Well, through you, Chair, the point was raised about the issue of the conservation issue and the design, because you heard from the agent that they were saying they were willing to work on the design. So what you haven't actually apparently got is a finalised design before you to approve. So that's why the proposal is to defer, from those members who put forward that proposal in order to address those issues. But the agent had indicated if the location was acceptable, because if members concluded they accepted the officer's recommendation, the location wasn't acceptable, there would be little point redesigning or working any further on the conservation issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to take a vote on whether we defer it. So is everybody happy to defer? Hands up, please.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just
Okay,
say,
Kelvin, bring Kelvin back in.
in terms of the points raised as well about the difference between an agricultural workers dwelling and a local needs dwelling, I think that this is important to clarify that as well, as part of, if members are minded to defer. The application form specifies that it's an application for the erection of a disabled access single-storey local needs dwelling. However, there are parts of the application supporting documents which also refer to there being a agricultural workers need as well. However, the primary consideration in the committee report has been in relation to a local needs dwelling, which are based upon different criteria and different policies to an agricultural workers dwelling, and I think it's important to clarify exactly on what terms we are dealing with the application, whether we're looking at it being an agricultural workers dwelling to allow for the retirement of the applicants from the agricultural business, or purely for their local needs in terms of enabling them to be housed in the local area based upon their local need criteria, which has been accepted already by the affordable housing team.
I get that, but how do we facilitate that now then, Kelvin? Do we need a vote on saying we defer it, or do we defer it as an agricultural dwelling or a local needs dwelling?
Well, if members are minded to defer, then further clarification can be put forward in terms of actually what the purpose of the application is and whether we're looking at it in the applicant refers to it as being a hybrid type application in relation to an agricultural workers dwelling or a local needs dwelling, but from an officer's perspective we need to understand whether it is primarily for a local needs dwelling or for, as I say, the retirement of the agricultural workers associated with the farm, and that also is important because it relates to the conditions as well that we would apply to a planning permission. So if members are inclined to defer the application, that matter can be looked into in more detail.
So we're taking a vote on whether to defer it and for then Kelvin and the agent to decide whether it's a local needs application or a agricultural dwelling application. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
It's defer for clarification on all the issues as discussed. That includes the heritage and the dwelling. As far as I'm concerned, the application submitted before us today is for a local needs dwelling. The description reads local needs dwelling. The agent seems to have brought into the equation about the agricultural. As the agent is aware, there are a different set of policies to consider on an agricultural workers dwelling. An agricultural workers dwelling is allowed anywhere in open countryside if there's a need to be on site. Local needs dwellings need to be adjacent to recognised settlements. It appears today members are mindful to agree that this is part of a settlement. Therefore, if we were to defer, we'd get clarification on all the other issues as Kelvin's just touched upon.
Okay, we're going to take a vote on to defer it so that the clarification can take place between the agents and the client and the planners. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
If your proposer and seconder are content with that,
I think we all just want to get from you now, Ron. Are you happy with that, councillors Eleanor and Mark?
Yes.
Can we take a vote on that we defer it? Everybody up for that? Thank you.
2, 3,
Is everybody voting that?
5, 6, I
Yes.
have, Chair.
Councillor Towers, are you voting for anything or are you voting against it?
I see it as a local needs. It's quite clear we do. So it's a no.
Do you need to see if there's against and abstentions, Chair?
Can we say who's against it then, please?
1, 2. Abstentions, Chair? I got 2, Chair.
Okay, any abstentions? So that's carried as a deferment. Now I'll gladly hand over to Paul again.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair, for that. Right, so, Anna, get back organised. Before we go any further, we have a latecomer coming in. Alex, would you like to come through, please? Alex, would you like to introduce yourself and your ward, please?
Hello, I'm Councillor Alex Wagner, representing Baybrook. Apologies for the delay.
Okay. Right, we'll move on to item 7, development of land Churcott off Welshpool Road, Bigton Heath. And Philip, you're presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application is made in full and proposes a mixed residential development scheme of 340 dwellings, which includes provision for 51 affordable dwellings, creation of access points and installation of infrastructure, which includes footpath links, public open space and biodiversity enhancement areas on land at Churcott of Welshpool Road, Bigton Heath, Shrewsbury. Members will be aware of the site, having made a visit to the site this morning. Your attention is drawn to the update sheet and the updates as indicated in relation to this application, which I'll run through briefly. The first one is a concern that was raised on site this morning with regards provision of affordable housing. Affordable housing for this site has been set at 15% as a result of a viability assessment in relation to the previous, and I emphasise, extant planning permission on site. This is recognised for both the Shrewsbury West Sustainable Urban Extension, which this site forms part of, as well as the Shrewsbury South Sustainable Urban Extension. There's a further letter of objection was received late. That's commented on. Then there's also, I want to make clear, as the report that's before you indicates, that the local member is Councillor Leslie Picton in the and her ward, which covers majority of the site. However, as pointed out to you on site this morning, there's the southeastern area where the ponds were is actually on an adjacent site, Bowbrook. So it's split. The application site is split between two different ward areas. Representations have been received from Shropshire area of the Ramblers, and their concerns about footpaths within the site and their future well-being. As pointed out in the update sheet, the Council's rights-of-way officer has been consulted on the diversions, and this matter is covered in 6.47 paragraph of your report. Also, a letter of objection has been received yesterday from a member of the public with regards what is considered unnecessary valuable wildlife habitat loss. This was in relation to the ponds, and this was something that was pointed out to you on site this morning, and I will touch on this matter further in my presentation to committee, as I have consulted with our ecologist, and she's come back with comments that she does not share the views of the member of the public as raised in this late submission. Finally, there's a type-in error in paragraph 6.81 of the committee report. It should read 15% affordable housing rather than 10%. That's an error on my behalf. Right, the application site is outlined in red. The narrow strip to the left-hand side is a biodiversity enhancement area, and this is located to the west of the site on the opposite side of Calcott Lane, which runs along the western side of the site. To the eastern side is where we met this morning, is Shepherd's Lane, and along the southern side is Welshpool Road, leading into Shrewsbury from the Churncott roundabout. To the north of the site is farmland and dotted dwellings on Calcott Lane, and as I'll indicate later, the site for the proposed Relief Road, Northwest Relief Road. Next slide, please. The layout plan for the site. During the application processing period, several amended plans were received in relation to the proposal, including this one, which is a revised layout plan now indicating retention of one of the 3 ponds on site. The application, as it was originally submitted, did not include provision for these ponds or retention of any of them, and the applicant has now submitted amended plans, as you can see, retaining the middle pond, which is the larger of the 3, and the one with the significant amount of water, which you saw, I believe you saw a swan swimming on it this morning as we walked around it. Members will be aware that the application represents a revised proposal on the site that, as I've already indicated, an extant planning permission for 296 dwellings. This application did not include provision of any of the ponds on site. The site is allocated for residential development in accordance with the local plan as part of the sustainable urban extension for the west of Shrewsbury, as I touched on. This plan before you now indicates the layout of the site, and to the north, although it isn't very clear, outside the dwelling area, there is the route of the proposed Northwest Relief Road. If you look to the east, to the western side, you can see a road running towards the site, and it crosses and it comes out and across Shepherd's Lane. That is a separate matter and subject to a separate planning application currently registered with the local planning authority. To the north of this road, there is a proposal for open space and further sustainable urban drainage. There is also a SUDS drainage system within the residential development site between the proposed siting of the Relief Road and the housing development. Connection to the open space on other side of the proposed Relief Road will be a matter for consideration as part of the application for the North West Relief Road. However, the plans submitted as part of this application do indicate a foot cycle bridge crossing this road on the opposite side of Shepherd's Lane, that is to the east of the site. The previous application on site proposed a play area in the northwestern corner alongside the proposed Relief Road. This has now been relocated to the eastern side in a more central location where it will get natural surveillance from surrounding dwellings. This is actually to the north of the pond, and the green connection with the oak trees retained, which members observed during the site visit this morning. The revised landscape master plan for the whole of the site, as it now is, without indication of the Relief Road, will run to the north of the housing area. It is acknowledged the site does provide open space in accordance with policy MD2. Not all of this can be described as recreational usable space, as some of it lends itself to biodiversity open space. And while this plan looks quite green in appearance, it does include individual household gardens, which of course in the event of approval to the application we would not condition as to their final layout. However, individual dwelling occupants layout and the rear gardens is a matter for them. There is no doubt this is a large-scale development, and green connectivity is essential in order to provide satisfactory green infrastructure and connectivity for biodiversity. And while in principle this is considered broadly acceptable, members will note in Appendix 1 on the recommended conditions, Condition 19 in relation to boundary treatment. This refers to the boundary of the site and rear boundaries of individual dwellings, as it is considered hedges help with green connectivity, and is considered necessary in this site in consideration of the density and location being semi-rural on the edge of the urban conurbation. Also in respect of landscape and visual matters, the comments by Leith Planning on behalf of Morris Leisure dated 23rd of February are noted in respect of cumulative and visual impacts and the surrounding countryside, to which the applicants responded with a revised landscape and visual impact addendum. It must also be recognised that this site has an extant planning permission for residential development and is on a site allocated for housing in accordance with the local plan. As such, with consideration to all the material considerations, it is considered by officers that landscape and visual impacts in relation to the wider surrounding area are acceptable, with consideration to the information is provided and discussed within the report before you on this matter. Next slide, please. The next slide shows a sample of the proposed dwellings to be built on site. If you run through them, please, the floor plans to the ones before just shown. Next slide, please. Next one. Next one. While it is acknowledged that the application proposes 40 more dwellings than the previous approval on the site, the emphasis in relation to the current application compared to the previous is much more on 3-bedroom dwellings, and this was a matter brought up on the site visit this morning, and as I informed, I told you I'd provide you with numbers today to compare what the size of the houses were on the previous application to what they were or in the current application. The previous application proposed 8 one-bedroom units. That is the same as the current application on 1 bed. 2 bedrooms, the current application proposes 60, 59 2-bedroom on the original. When it comes to 3-bedroom dwellings, the original application proposed 97. This application proposes 199. And then 4-bedroom dwellings, the previous one 133, the current one 73. Which brings the total of proposed for this site to 340 compared to the previous 297. In consideration of the location, which includes consideration to access onto public highways, the net increase is considered acceptable and does not propose such a large overall increase in net bedrooms when looking at the breakdown of dwellings on site and their size. Now run through a number of photographs. The slide up before you now is a proposed street scene of how it envisages the inner part of the development will look. There are a small number of dwellings within the heart application site with 2.5 storey, which makes use of the space as the plan above indicates. Next slide, please. That's in the heart of the site, an indicative plan of how it envisages to look. And now there's a number of photographs. This one, although it's not that clear looking on the screen, it does look out towards Shepherd's Lane when standing to the side of the ponds, which we walked past that side this morning. These photographs are looking out towards Calcutta Lane. And the third one is the existing, go back please, there's 4 photographs on the same slide there. There's the pond to be retained on site. And another view out towards, again, Calcutta Lane, I believe that one is. Next slide, please. The members will have noted on site this morning a number of veteran oak trees. There's an example of one of them. Most of these are to be retained, all the important ones. And members queried on site this morning about a condition to ensure they're retained in perpetuity. I'm looking at the conditions. I have recommended condition number 11, which does include provision for their safekeeping. And the final photograph on this slide is again the photograph of the pond to be retained. Then the slide below you is showing a dwelling along Calcutta Lane. Calcutta Lane in the vicinity of this site is not as residential, numerous with properties as what Shepherd's Lane is. Next slide, please. Right, the main vehicle access into the site is off Welshpool Road. There are also 2 other vehicle accesses proposed off the site onto Calcutta Lane, but these are to be restricted to housing on that side of the site and in accordance with the highway adoption plan submitted as part of the application. This slide indicates hedging on opposite side of the road, which forms part of the entrance to Gaines Park housing development as observed by members during their site visit this morning. It is considered by officers that Gaines Park has matured very well into the surrounding landscape, considering how semi-rural this was, and it obviously was even more rural when Gaines Park was constructed. Next slide, please. That's showing the other side of the entrance to Gaines Park, again with native hedge indicating a well-defined semi-rural boundary. Next slide. Right, this is showing some residential development alongside Welshpool Road, which adjoins the site. Members will have noted this morning there are 1 or 2 dwellings in a group together which jut into the site. That just shows the one nearest to Welshpool Road. As touched on in the update report, further to the letter of objection received yesterday and referred to on the update sheet, I have consulted with the Council's ecology team, and they have acknowledged that there is now retention of one of the ponds, as shown on the amended proposal. And together with creation of 7 new ponds, specifically for wildlife, it is considered the status of wetland habitat in the local area will be maintained. Together, the retained larger pond and the smaller ponds will provide a variety of wetland habitats in this area. The ponds in the biodiversity enhancement will promote the status of great crested newts, which are a European protected species. However, it is also acknowledged ponds suitable for great crested newts are also highly suitable to support other aquatic life. The ponds in the biodiversity enhancement area are not sub ponds, but designed for and will be managed for wildlife. Also, the surveys as part of the ecology survey submitted in support of the application was carried out by members of the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management who are bound by the Code of Professional Conduct. Therefore, reliance can be made on the survey information as submitted. Therefore, as per the previous comments by the ecology team, they believe that the application as a whole does meet the requirements of policies CS17 and MD12 in the local plan. It is also noted that Leith Planning, on behalf of Morris Leisure, in their objection to the application, raised concerns with regards to the proposed road layout and impacts on Churncott Roundabout. Churncott Roundabout is part of the highway network that is responsible by Highways England. Highways England were consulted on the application as indicated in paragraph 4.4 in your report. They have indicated they do not consider the proposal will have a significant impact on the Churncott roundabout, and as such do not expect the applicants to undertake any further traffic impacts in support of the application. Members' attention is also drawn to section 6.8 of the committee report and the contributions towards community infrastructure levy and the section 106 contributions as indicated in paragraph 6.84. The section 106 is currently under consideration and is in a draft form while the application is being processed, and will include provision for clauses in consideration of affordable housing, which, as I've indicated, has been set at 15%. The clause is in acknowledgement of the lower affordable housing percentage viability, and as it was to the previous application subsequently approved. And there will be a clause as part of this section 106 if the overall payment in the event of profit above 20% of the gross development value, then an additional housing financial payment will be required. In conclusion, with consideration to all the material considerations, and Whistle officers acknowledge the concerns of both Bigton Parish Council and Shrewsbury Town Council in their respectful responses to the application, and those of the various organisations and members of the public as referred to in the report. On balance, this application is considered by officers to be acceptable, and consideration has been given to the current extant plan permission on site, and whistle this application before you proposes 40 more dwellings. In officers' eyes, it does include better landscape mitigation, which, as I've indicated, includes retention of one of the existing ponds on site. And with consideration to green connectivity and emphasis on boundary treatment, green credentials in relation to the current proposal are considered an overall improvement in relation to biodiversity issues compared to previous approval. Therefore, the recommendation has to be one of approval, subject to the Section 106 agreement in relation to the matters as outlined in Section 8 of the report before you, and finer detail as considered necessary by the planning manager and the conditions as set out in Appendix 1 attached to this report, and also referred to a condition on the update sheet. And any amendments to these conditions as considered necessary by the service manager. That concludes my presentation on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Just before we go any further, Miranda would just like to pick up a point on the update sheet. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, for the avoidance of doubt, if you note on the update sheet, members, there are a number after item 6 on page 1, it then starts referring to item 8. Well, it's actually this item on item 7, so I think there's been a little bit of a numerical confusion. So in each of the things on the update sheet, it does refer to the application number, which of course is 2011957. So just to be clear that you have picked up all the updates on that update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Right, we have some speakers on this one. The first one is Stephen Malloy. Would like to come forward? Would like to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes, Stephen, and we'll indicate when the 30 seconds is up, okay? When we've got 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Dear committee members, I'd like to address the amount of affordable housing proposed with this application, which forms part of the Bigton urban extension. At the examination of the core strategy, the developers assured the inspector that the housing development could provide the Oxon Link Road, improvements to Churncote Island, and relocation of the Oxon Park and Ride, and still be viable. Since then, the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership has contributed £4.2 million to the Oxon Link Road, and the housing development is no longer paying for improvements to Churncote Island or relocation of Oxon Park and Ride. So if the housing development was viable at the examination of the core strategy, it is difficult to believe that it is not viable now when it is providing less infrastructure. The officer's report says that the provision of 15% affordable housing is policy compliant, but that is not correct. It is actually 20%. So the application before members today should be providing 68 affordable homes, not 51. Given that the developers insisted the scheme was viable in order to get it adopted in the core strategy, this begs the question why officers feel it is appropriate to now reduce the affordable housing contrary to policy CS11 of the development plan. Planning law requires that applications for planning permission must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. This application does not comply with affordable housing policy, and even if there are now claims of viability issues, viability is not a material consideration when development land is purchased with full knowledge of developer contributions required, and even if it was, there is no viability assessment provided for scrutiny. There are 5,814 households in Shropshire in need of affordable housing. And with the imminent end of the government COVID restriction on evictions, this number is likely to grow significantly this year. The existing consent also undersupplies on affordable housing, but the local planning authority has the power to revoke or modify planning permission if it appears expedient to do so. Therefore, I respectfully ask that this committee defers the application for a full viability assessment made publicly available for transparency and seeks modification of the existing planning consent to ensure it complies with Affordable Housing Policy CS11. Failure to do this will effectively see those in need of affordable housing paying for the North West Relief Road. So what is more important, housing those in need or building a ruinously expensive, environmentally disastrous road?
Thank you. I'm afraid you'll have to finish now.
Sorry, sir?
Your 3 minutes is up now.
All right. Could I just raise a point of order, if that's okay?
Point of order. Why would that? Go on.
Well, the case officer said that a rate of 15% had been agreed on this urban extension. That actually expired in November 2018.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask the question. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. Just make a note of that, okay? So, right, we now have Mandy Lee from the Parish Council. Bigton, would you like to come forward, please? Thank you, Mandy. You have 3 minutes. I'll try and shout out when you've got 30 seconds left, okay?
Okay. We acknowledge the plan, evolving over 6 years, is improved, but still strongly object as representation of the parish residents. The number of houses has increased by 15%, resulting in a development that is overdeveloped and overwhelmingly dense. Housing aside, the plan contains no new facilities that benefit parishioners. The increased density, together with the lack of accessible services, does not meet the MPPF social objective. According to the principles of the Council-endorsed West Midlands Design Charter of 2020, the plans are out of character with parish qualities and the adjacent Bowbrook ward. The plans fail to promote walking and cycling because local facilities are lacking. This encourages car use. The plans create an isolated community without access to nature or enabling physical activity. The plans don't comply with further MPPF aspects. The infrastructure is inadequate. Local schools are at a capacity with without plans for extra demand. Bigton Heath Supermarket is too small to meet the demands of new residents. Parking for residents and visitors is inadequate. Parking on pavements is inevitable, which will be hazardous for pedestrians, waste collection and emergency vehicles. Locally, large and small employers are lacking, so residents will need to travel to work. Local roads are narrow. Increased traffic will lead to access issues for all residents, and this is before further planned development to the south is considered. The site is poorly drained, as indicated by the recurrence of 18th century natural ponds, ditches draining from Bowbrook in the A5, and recent flooding on Calcott Lane. Drainage plans don't show how increased runoff from increased impermeable surfaces into existing ditches won't increase flooding both locally and potentially elsewhere in the parish of Bigton along the Bigton Brook. The open space is poor. It relies on tiny, disconnected pockets of land, on street edges, corners, inaccessible site borders, land which may be occupied by the proposed North West Relief Road, and land on the other side of that road. The North West Relief Road, also in the planning stage, exacerbates these issues. Notably, the developers have objected to the road, claiming its boundaries have moved. This emphasises the unsafe aspects of granting planning permission without an overarching plan, which would show how the development and the proposed road might coexist. Regardless of the primacy of this application, this development does not provide a safe environment or promote health and well-being as sought by the UNPPF of the West Midlands Design Charter. Alone, this plan doesn't deliver a sustainable development because of the proposed increased housing density at the expense of facilities.
30 seconds left, man.
Incorporating some of the design improvements in this latest planning iteration would improve existing approved plans. However, it is essential to migrate the drawbacks and further restrict density, stopping overdevelopment. Bigton Parish Council recommend approval should not be granted until the issues arising from the increased density are addressed, together with a master plan for the sustainable urban extension and any proposed roads.
Thank you. You had 2 seconds left, Mandy. Well done. Right. Right now we have the agent Richard Anderson. Hang on a sec. Oh, Alex, sorry. Alex, you have 5 minutes to speak. If you need, I'm sure you don't, but you have 5 minutes, okay?
The Bigton Parish Objection is one that's really worth reading. I know it's in the report that's been given out because it raises a number of really interesting points. One of which I think is particularly fascinating is that there is actually quite a great deal of inconsistency in this application. It continually references, for example, the fact that Shrewsbury School is a good local school that people could go to, and Walton High School, which isn't in the area, is on there. It also, if you go to page 134 of this, at section 6.83 and 6.84, what appears to have been added in is a financial contribution towards the link road and a contribution to acoustic fencing alongside the link road, as well as the council contributing more to open space. Now, I know that it might be likely to happen, but that is quite a big supposition. And actually, I think that the fact that there has been an objection from developers or via developers to part of the North West Road based on the boundaries changing does again show that even if there is primacy to this application, there's a level of joined-up thinking lacking, which I really think we will come to regret not taking more seriously once or if future development happens. I also think that on active travel and on travel schemes in general, though some of the reports suggest that this will be satisfactory, I think that a very good point raised is that the low provision of garages and consequential lack of storage space for cyclists mean that it will actually be inadequate for your average family if you want to cycle or use wider active travel schemes in this part of town. I think more generally, and I know it was a point possibly on members' minds due to the site visit earlier today, the need for better protection of trees and hedges on the site, which even though they're now in the, there is now a pond protected and more trees are protected in the new version, there are no protection orders. And also, I think it's, again, on page 75 in the Bigton Parish Objection, the fact that many of the hedges seem to be planned to be partially removed is very unhelpful in terms of actually understanding what the impact of that is. And I am a little bit worried about voting on partial removal. As members have seen from that site, it is, fairly, that there are a lot of hedges, a lot of wildlife, a lot of sort of woodland, and, just voting for partial, I mean, that could be between 1 and 99%. As a final point, I think the Shrewsbury Town Council response on the matter put it really well, which is that members feel that the green space within the plans is inadequate for the density of housing and would like to see more green space provision. I'd also add that, though this is perhaps a supplementary point, if you like, for a lot of people in Gaines Park Estate, which, as we've seen in the photos, is just across the road, this is quite a main green area. Though that you can walk around the estate, it is an estate, and this is one of the main areas used by local residents. So, to councillors who have a vote on this, I would really urge you to look quite carefully at the impact it's going to have on local residents, and I think that some of the comments made by Bigton Parish Council are really worth paying attention to.
Thank you, Alex. I'm afraid you'll have to go and sit back,
Not
back
again.
of the rooms for being late as well, okay? Thank you. Right, now we'll jump to the agent, Richard Anderson. You'd like to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes, Richard, and we'll give you a 30-second warning.
30 minutes would be nice. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you. My client, Barrett David Wilson, has considerable experience in delivering sustainable communities across the region, in fact, across the country. The principal aim here at West Shrewsbury is to do the same, to deliver 340 homes, including 51 affordable dwellings with carefully thought through landscaping, play areas and open space. As it stands, this application is not the first inkling that residential development is appropriate here. The site is not only allocated for residential development in your plan, with the detail of this allocation fleshed out in a master plan, which councillors adopted in 2013, it also benefits from an implementable extant outline planning permission granted in 2019. As such, with these strong material considerations, we firmly believe the principle of residential development is clear. In addition, contrary to what has been suggested before me, we do provide key policy drivers, providing policy-compliant, affordable homes here at 15%. This was indeed picked up by members on site, and the case officer explained the reasoning why we are indeed policy compliant. What has been proposed is a range of house sizes and types, from detached and semi-detached through to terraced, with a carefully thought through landscape setting. At the heart of both the western and eastern elements are generous green corridors or functional space, which not only provides a recreational and play area, but a landscape buffer softening the impact of built form across the development. This is complemented by careful thought and attention being given to the introduction of trees and landscape all across the site, particularly north-south and on the site's eastern boundary east-west and towards the top of the site. There are also substantial areas of amenity and open space across the development. In terms of design and layout, careful thought has gone into the site's constraints and opportunities, the policy parameters expected of us, and indeed the 2019 approved extant development. What has resulted is a development which reflects what the market expects, addressing relevant planning policy, and unlike many applications which may come before you, will be built out. Overall, we believe that the application before you will not only deliver much needed private and affordable homes for the Shrewsbury area, but will result in a sustainable residential environment. We therefore respectfully request planning permission is granted.
30 seconds left.
I don't need 30 seconds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh, God. Right. So that's all the speakers done. So now, Philip, you'd like to bring anything forward at the moment after the speakers?
Yes, there is one point. The affordable housing issue at 15%. My understanding from the housing officer team is that this is policy compliant as a result of a memorandum of understanding which refers to both SUEs, that is the Shrewsbury South and the Shrewsbury West. And this has been agreed for a fixed period until the 31st of August 2022. As I've also indicated during my presentation, if the profit margins were higher, then there would be a clause in the section 106 to bring it up to 20% with a requirement for financial contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, I'll open it up for debate. Anybody indicating to start? Kick us off. Thank you, Jeff.
Can I just ask, it does say somewhere, and
Can you just take your mask off when you speak, please, Jeff?
I'm struggling to find it again, but I did read earlier on that I've written down that Shropshire Council asked for a reduction of 17 dwellings. Why was that?
So,
Thank you.
Are Shropshire Council actually saying that there are too many dwellings in this application?
Yeah. The current application, there's been a lot of negotiation on and a lot of amended plans received. We had to have a reduction because we wanted retention of one of the ponds, basically. And so by retaining that obviously they couldn't build the amount of dwellings they wanted, so they reduced them, but they reduced them in what we consider now to an acceptable level in relationship to the scale of the houses on site, which are much more emphasis on smaller houses, and we consider the density with appropriate landscaping to be satisfactory.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Edward.
Thank you. I welcome the improvements shown in the second version of plans. As I say, I've come into a fresh pair of eyes here, but with experience too. I'm looking at slide 44 and just wondering about the intensity of the development, to be honest, because we had some development just done on the outskirts of our town, which sadly, is not good. And we have cars on street parking, which is making it difficult for emergency vehicles and all sorts of things like that. I wonder how much provision has been made for each house to have 2 cars, let's say, because that would get the cars off the road. So it's questions like that I've got. I can't see in this central area anyway. I appreciate the trees and all that, but it just looks to me as though we're crammed too many in, a bit over-intensive.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recommend that we approve these plans based on the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Nice. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mark. Any more comments or debate on it? Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, I just worry about the cutting off of the green space by the Northwest Road. If it, you know, if it does get built, how is that going to be overcome?
Thank you. Philip, could you?
Could you? I didn't quite catch the start of your question.
Cutting off the green space by the Northwest Relief Road if it happens. He's worried.
Right. The overall design has shown consideration to a relief road being built. The main concern was access to it, and that, as I've emphasised, is part of the application for the road. The plans currently registered with the council for consideration as part of our application do indicate a cycle footbridge for the connectivity. Our ecology team are happy with the biodiversity enhancements as offered by the applicants. If you go to the first slide with the red line, please. The first slide, please. That shows the application site with the biodiversity enhancement area. So overall, while the ecology team accept this loss of some green space, well, biodiversity in the pond area, the main pond is retained and enhanced, and there is also other biodiversity enhancement. So overall, there is no net loss. In response to the earlier councillor's concerns about parking on site, our highways manager raises no objections, and the application does provide provision for garages. You noted, although that looked quite tense development in the central area, there were drives between houses, and there are garages proposed in relation to many of the houses proposed.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just like a number of issues, really pick up on what was just being said there. I do worry about the lack of what I think is good green connectivity within the site. I mean, I know that the officers are making argument there is good connectivity, but looking at the plans, I don't see that myself at all. And I do think there's a case to say there's overdevelopment here. There's been a significant increase in the number of houses that were proposed. And I do worry about that issue. The other thing is about the treatment of the water, and I know that when we went around the site today, there is a significant area which is very wet and boggy, much bigger than shown on the plan. Obviously, there's two of the larger pools disappearing, but I do wonder whether there's going to be significant problems with water affecting areas nearby, and I do think that further consideration ought to be should be given to the treatment of the water and how it's going to be dealt with. And the mention is made of the seven ponds in two groups. I wasn't sure exactly where they were, but I do worry about that, because the area we walked through today was very wet and was quite a large area in actual fact. The other thing which I'm concerned about this, and maybe I'm not experienced enough, but on the Section 106 agreement, I think there ought to be more details about that. I'm a bit worried about having something which is currently in draft form, apparently on paragraph 6.8.4 on page 134. I do worry about that, and perhaps the officers like to comment upon that. I would like more detail on that before we agree to give planning permission for this development.
Thank you, Dave. Philip, can you help us out there with the water and the drainage and the 106 agreement?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, drainage has been subject to extensive discussions on this application because of the ponds, and we've had a number of concerns on drainage in general in the county, and there's been a number of drainage strategies submitted and late plans which are available on the website for inspection. I can assure you it has been a matter that's been looked at into extensively, and our drainage team are satisfied with the detail as submitted on this matter. I'm just going to check through the conditions now. Yes, condition 20 touches on drainage, but the council's drainage officer has looked at this extensively, and as I've indicated, is satisfied with the detail on drainage matters.
Sorry, what page is that? Sorry.
Is there anything else?
What page?
Sorry, what page was that on? Sorry.
What page now? The condition. What are you looking for at the conditions?
Yeah, but
Condition 13 as well.
Condition number 13, isn't it? Oh, there it is, sorry. Yes, condition number 13, the drainage manager did not consider any further works as required on drainage, and they were quite happy with the plans as submitted, and that is covered in condition number 13. Sorry, I think I referred to the wrong condition before, 20. I was looking at the wrong. It's condition number 13. And the drainage team are quite happy with the plans as submitted, and they feel that drainage is adequately addressed.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, David?
yeah, can I just ask about the connectivity issue? Because if you look at the plan, I don't know if we can go back to the plan on the plan of the development. There's like a road going right the way through the middle, and you're talking about green connectivity, but in actual fact, doesn't seem, looking at the plan, it doesn't seem to be
green connectivity or the road.
Green connectivity between. You argued on the, about the green connectivity. The site allowed.
Yes, I initially shared your concerns on this matter. Hence the reason we've looked into it, and I've emphasised how the necessary condition number 19, I believe, with boundary treatments, because they do provide connectivity. Because the fear is that pond could become isolated on its own, and it needs. Officers considered it needed strengthening with green connectivity. It does have a green passage to the one side of it. However, we accepted it. It was weak. Hence the reason I've made emphasis today on the need for to ensure that there's adequate landscaping as part of this approval with regards boundaries, which do provide connectivity from one green area to another.
Right. Lastly, on the Section 106 agreement.
The key issues are outlined in Section 6.8, which will be the main detail will be included in the Section 106 agreement. And you'll notice the recommendation is delegated to the planning manager to ensure that the final detail is incorporated. But this application does have a Section 106 agreement, which will be similar to the agreement for the previous approval, and to which there was also a legal agreement. and officers are currently working on that. It hasn't been finalised yet, but that I'm recommending that the planning manager has delegated authority to amend if he feels necessary in relation to final wording. But the financial contributions, which will form part of the Section 106, are set out in the report.
Is it usual for Section 106 agreements to be finalised, or?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Is it usual for Section 106 agreements to be finalised at such a stage when we're giving planning approval?
Shropshire Council's policy in the past has been to agree to Section 106s after a decision has been made, because of the cost to the developers in the event that an application get refused. However, we are now moving in the direction of negotiating Section 106s as part of the application processing. It so happens that this is quite an extensive application. It's not small, so there's been a lot of negotiation on the application. And as far as the legal agreement is concerned, they're ongoing. One of the problems you have with a legal agreement is you do need to have the consultee responses back first before you can finalise what is to be included in the agreement. Like on this one, for example, there's a lot of discussion around green infrastructure and biodiversity. Therefore, we needed to be sure on what was said in the responses before we set out what to put in Section 106. We have been in discussions with the applicants on this matter. There is a draft format set out, and there is broad agreement on the contents of the 106.
Can I just make a further comment?
Pardon?
Can I just make a further comment?
Okay.
I do think on this planning application we have difficulty because there is planning permission for this development, for a development here, and we are looking at a kind of amendment to that, if you like, a new plan. So I do think that there is a real problem if we were to refuse planning permission on this particular site.
We will struggle with that, obviously, because there's already planning in place.
But I do have my doubts about it. I do have concerns about it.
Okay, thank you, David. If there's no more comments, we've got a proposer and a seconder. We can go to the vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7.
7 against.
1, 2.
Abstentions?
1.
1. Okay. That's gone with the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next one, which we can't because it's been withdrawn. So we'll move on to number 9, which is Land to the North West Road, Maud Oswestry. And I've got my list somewhere. And I know who's going to do. And that's Philip. You are. No, you're not.
Toilet break.
You are Philip. You are presenting this.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The toilet break.
Chair.
Just hang a sec. Don't start yet. It looks like they're going to have toilet breaks, and if you leave the room, you can't come back and take part. By the way, there's all these rules set. He's already gone. Does anybody want to go? Go now. If you want to go. There you go. We have been over 2 hours, so it is acceptable. But normally you would ask, but never mind. We'll get there in the end. It's a learning curve for a lot of us, a lot of you.
Toilet break.
It's all right.
Sorry.
What do you think?
Got the right result? Got the result? Almost you aren't making it.
You want to speak now? You want to speak? Yeah, I think. Put it silent.
spaces he will be. More pen, ornament. Quiet.
That's going for David, eh? Man. Gary. Okay, good. Right, we're back up to strength again, so now we can commence. Philip is presenting this. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application proposes erection of 20 affordable dwellings with associated roads and vehicle access on land to the north of Western Road, Mauder, Oswestry. Members' attention is drawn to the update sheet and the further letters of representation received, which officers consider raise no further issues than as covered in the report. It is noted the Council's affordable housing team is in support of the application as outlined in paragraph 4.14 of the report. Detail in relation to the acoustic fence has been received and this is considered acceptable, and the Council's regulatory services raise no further comment, and this matter is also covered in condition number 6 as indicated on the update sheet. Shropshire Council Highways Manager has confirmed that he considers Western Road acceptable in relation to additional vehicle movement as a result of the proposal. The response from the Council's Education confirms that Mauder School currently has unfilled spaces and therefore is not at pupil capacity. We now move on to the slides, please. Application site is outlined in red and runs alongside Western Road on the edge of the settlement. Next slide, please. This is the proposed block plan showing the layout of the proposed development. 20 dwellings, semi-detached. 8 are to be bungalows, single storey, and 12 are two-storey in what is considered well laid out, adequate spacious gardens with the required open space provision. Elevations and floor plans, please. This indicates some of the semi-detached two-storey dwellings. Two-bed dwelling, that one. Next one, please. Again, two-storey. A single-storey, two-bed, semi-detached. And the final one is two-storey, three-bed, semi-detached. Next plan, please. This plan indicates the built-up form of Mauder in relation to the site, as outlined in red. You'll see to my left-hand side, the site area outlined in red on the edge of the settlement, along Western Road, obviously on the western side of Mauder. Next plan, please. This is a site photograph indicating Western Road on the entrance to the site. Next slide, please. This is an adjacent modern development to the west of the site obviously on the Mauder side. And the final one, please. That's the site in relation to the built farm. While it is acknowledged Mauder is classed as open countryside in accordance with the local plan, this application is for affordable housing as an exception site, and thus the application fully complies with policy CS11 of the local plan in relation to affordable housing provision on site. On a site that is considered sustainable with the services the settlement has to offer. As noted earlier, the school in Mauder has capacity for more pupils. Shropshire Council Highways Manager raises no objections considering access arrangements are adequate in relation to Western Road and suitable for the development as proposed. The Council's drainage team also raised no objections. Condition number 3 in Appendix 1 refers to detail required in relation to surface and foul water drainage. The Council's housing team are satisfied with regards to criteria identifying need and affordable housing and the mix proposed on site. Research indicates that whilst Mauder has an influx of planning permissions during the year 2013, they have since then averaged on approximately 15 dwellings per year. I bring that matter to your attention because there have been concerns that Mauder in recent years has had a significant increase in recent development. These are a result of planning permissions granted when we didn't have a 5-year land supply around the year 2013. Currently, there are no applications being considered for unencumbered development, but of course this is a rural exception site and therefore meets policy requirements in relation to affordable housing. In conclusion, this application is recommended for approval by officers as it is considered to be in accordance with the local plan and represents an application that officers consider has been well thought out in relationship to scale, layout and design. It is recommended for approval subject to conditions as outlined in Appendix 1 and Condition 6 as referred to on the update sheet. And the applicants, of course, signing a Section 106 agreement in order to ensure that dwellings remain affordable units in perpetuity. That concludes my presentation of this application, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. We only have one speaker on this, and it's the local member, Joyce. Thank you very much. You have 5 minutes if you wish, and then if you could move to the back of the room afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I thank you first of all and the Vice Chair for bringing this to committee, because there is real concern from residents and my parish council about this application. The village of Mauder has taken more and more development over the years than any other part of my area. At the beginning of the consultation on the local plan just a few years ago, I had a meeting with 3 of my parish councillors and Adrian Cooper, who is the lead officer on the local plan. He told us that Mauder wouldn't be required to take any more development as it had its fair share of development. Social cohesion has been affected with the last 3 developments at the Cottons, the Ashes, and there's another development opposite the Ashes, expanding what was a village. This is not to mention land off Kingfisher Way, which still hasn't been completed as the development company went bust before its completion, and this adjoins the proposed site. And please bear in mind the houses on this site, while different to the ones we're looking at now, haven't all sold and some still haven't even been built. Concerns are raised about a rat run that will be made with this development when it's completed, bringing added pressure onto Western Road. That's a very real danger. I have asked today for pictures of Western Road to be shown because this road leads to the village of Weston with 2 establishments, Weston Pools and Stonehouse Brewery, both of whom serve food and drink. Residents take their lives in their hands walking along this stretch of road, as the residents of Weston would tell you, having just managed to get a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit after a number of years of campaigning. Maysbury Road Industrial Estate is a stone's throw from here, with some employees walking this road regularly to work. I feel that Morda has become an easy target, if you'll excuse the expression, for dumping new houses. Forgive me for that, please, Philip. The settlement of Morda, in accordance with the current local plan, is classed as open countryside. Please remember that. It is not a settlement and therefore not categorised as a community hub or cluster under SAMDEV policy MD1. This is a material consideration. As the report points out, the Housing Supplementary Planning Documents and LDF Policy CS11 provide a framework for consideration of affordable homes on exception sites. But there is a balance to be had between overdevelopment and providing affordable houses. In this instance, I believe overdevelopment is outweighed by the damage that will be done on the social cohesion and the safety of residents on a daily basis on Western Road. Lastly, in 6.1.6 of the report, the current home point data indicates 29 people are on the list who have Oswestry Rural as their first choice in the parish. However, having drilled down into this number, only 6 of those people currently live in Morda and 11 others live in other areas across the parish. Please consider and balance this application on the facts laid before you. And please remember, this is open countryside. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. Philip, would you like to make any comments before we...
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, in relationship to this, the highway issues, I have spoke to the highway officer on this, in fact, only yesterday morning, and he was very clear in that he has no objections to this application and did not even see the need to be present at committee today in relation to this application on highway matters. As far as affordable housing development is concerned, Morda is considered a sustainable settlement for such development with the range of services it has to offer, which includes a primary school. And as far as affordable housing is concerned, in accordance with Shropshire Council Housing Team's advice, there is clearly a demonstrated need for affordable housing in this particular settlement, which, as many of you will be aware, is on the edge of Oswestry. Thank you.
Just one more thing, Philip, about the delivery of local people. Joyce mentioned about local people not having sufficient numbers there. Is that already been sorted out? Is that been decided who has what?
I believe the local member has been in discussions with our housing team on that matter, and they've come back this morning confirming that they're satisfied there is a need for affordable housing in this settlement in accordance with our policy criteria. In fact, there's more of a need than what this scheme will provide.
Thank you, Philip. Before we go, but I'd just like to say my concerns with Councillor Barrow. Highways, it's a tight little road down there. But if highways say it's okay, it's okay. They're almost God. That's, I know it's frustrating. I've done this for 20 years. It's frustrating when highways say it's right and you think, no, it's not. But they know their stuff and that's the way it goes. I'm opening up for debate now. Anyone like to kick off? Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I know the area well. I mean, it's good to see that they are proposing some bungalows. We all want bungalows. We all cry out for bungalows, and now we've got a settlement that involves bungalows, and the locals don't want it. So I'd say I would propose that we do go for this site. It's a good little site. It is open countryside, but then it's probably a better site than the site we did earlier. So I think it's a rat run, but maybe more traffic slows the traffic up. So the village hasn't got a great village shop and it hasn't got a great village pub. But I think that's because more people not supporting it. If there's more people in the village, more it gets supported. So it might be open more. So I'm for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Gerald, you've indicated.
Yes, just to say that I'd like to second that. It seems a reasonable development. Not too many houses. I think it can cope with it very well. The school certainly can cope with it, and I'd like to see this go ahead. So
thank you. Well, that's a second. I'll take yours as a proposal, Mark. Okay?
Yeah, I'll take that, yes.
Any more comments?
Could I just quickly ask, I noticed that there's been comment from Oswestry Parish and the local, Oswestry Rural Parish and the local member. Was there a considerable body of public comments? Because I can see that they're bullet pointed, but were there many of them? I fear I'm missing something. But because I actually know that area reasonably well, having grown up down the road, and for what it's worth, I think as far as this affordable housing locations go, that's probably not an unreasonable one. And I think there's also Stonehouse Brewery is sort of a pub in its own right down the road. So
it's a brewery which has a bar.
Yeah, some good pizzas I hear. But I think I'd be interested to see what the level of sort of detail of public objection was, if that would be possible.
Yeah.
Was it just bullet points or?
Can I refer you, Councillor, to paragraph 4.21 in the officer's report, public comments? There was actually only 4 letters of objection to this application.
Okay, cool. That's fine. That's all. I was just wondering if there's a way of
But you're quite right.
Are there any in greater detail, I suppose, is really the body of the question than that.
The key issues that have been raised are outlined.
Okay.
But on this occasion, officers didn't share their...
No, that's fine.
Thank you. If there's nobody indicating, I have a proposer and a seconder. Nobody else wants to speak, I shall put it to the vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think that's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, thank you very much. That's gone with the officer's recommendation. Right, moving on, we are... thank you, Joyce, you can come back in. Land opposite 6 Sandy Pennell Walk, Market Drayton. I should know. Philip, this is yours again.
Yes. Right. Are you ready?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application is made in outline and proposes erection of a detached local needs dwelling with all matters other than access reserved for future consideration on land opposite 6 Sandy Lane, Helwell, Market Drayton. There are no updates on this application. The site is as outlined in red on the first slide, please. You'll see the site outlined in red. To the one side, there is a farm building, and on opposite side of the road is a business in relationship to tractor sales and repairs owned by the applicant's family, I understand, where there is one dwelling. Otherwise, this site, in officer's opinion, is open countryside. The photographs I've got on the presentation will indicate this further as we progress. Next slide, please. As I pointed out to start with, the application is made in outline. That just indicates how a dwelling could look in sight. Whistle, the council has accepted this application to be processed. I must point out that the supplementary planning guidance on local needs dwellings indicates they should be submitted in full. Because this is an outline application, I'm going to have no elevation of floor plans to show you the type of dwelling that is going to be built on, proposed to be built on site. Next slide, please. This is an aerial photograph of the site and the surrounding area. As you can see, mainly open fields. Next slide, please. There's a closer up to the application site. Next slide, please. Right, that is the application site. Next slide. Adjacent to the site. Next slide, please. Again, as you can see, it's what officers consider open countryside. Next slide, please. That's the barn adjacent to the site. Again, adjacent to the site. the applicant's dwelling and applicant's parents' dwelling on opposite side of the road. And the final one, please. That's a view to the east with well-formed roadside hedges, as you can see in that photograph. Members will be fully aware of the relevant policy in relation to this application, policy CS11 of the core strategy, as well as the SPD on affordable housing, which is clear in that locations for single-plot affordable dwellings must be located within or adjacent recognised settlements. In this instance, as clearly set out in pre-application advice to the applicants, prior to submission of this application, officers do not consider this site forms part of any recognised settlement, or for that matter, within close proximity or adjacent to one, as the photographs as part of this presentation have clearly, in officers' opinion, demonstrated. A summary of the pre-application advice given is set out in paragraph 1.2 of the officer's report to committee. Interestingly, the local member, in his request for committee consideration of this application, refers to the design and scale of the proposed dwelling, in that it is appropriate and does not adversely affect either the landscape or rural character. I'm a little bit at a loss as to how we could come to this conclusion, considering this is an outline application. However, these are matters reserved for future consideration if this application was to be successful. For members' benefit, there is a map of the surrounding area forming part of the report to committee, as indicated on page 202 in your report, in relation to paragraph 6.15. The site is circled. The area known as Pell Wall is located to the north. And Whistle, the site is not considered by officers to be anywhere near or adjacent to, in proximity to Pell Wall. It is not considered a recognised settlement. Woods Eaves, as indicated on the map, site a considerable distance to the south. Another issue affecting this proposal is the response from the Council's regulatory services, which required a noise assessment of the application, as outlined in paragraph 4.18 of the officer's report. The case officer invited the applicant via their agent to submit a noise assessment in support of the application. However, they declined, indicating that the dwelling will form part of the applicant's family business, which, as I've indicated, is tractor repairs and sales. And this matter could be addressed via the attachment of conditions to any approval notice issued or via a Section 106 agreement. I must remind members that this application is for a local needs dwelling, and as such, in accordance with local policies, must remain as a local needs dwelling in perpetuity. And thus this matter cannot be dealt with as advised by the agent in response, as it is not a rural business dwelling. As we indicated in the application earlier today, this is a matter that would need to be subject to different policies and an essential and demonstrated functional need for dwelling on site if it was to be in connection to a rural dwelling. The noise issue has to be addressed via assessment prior to any consideration to a favourable recommendation. Otherwise, any approval notice would not stand the tests of reasonableness should the applicants wish to remove the local needs clause. Finally, not as it is considered relevant by officers, it was noted the applicants, in support of their application, submitted as part of their design and access statement a list of surrounding dwellings with Pell Wall within their postal address. This is not considered unreasonable. Every address has to have some postal address. However, officers have noted that one of these dwellings, which actually is situated on Sandy Lane, is referred to as Greenways. This dwelling actually is subject to a rural occupancy restriction, and it is noted by officers that this property is currently on the market for sale with a local estate agent. In conclusion, officers cannot support this application for the reasons as discussed during this presentation and outlined in the report before you, as it is considered contrary to the policies as outlined in the final paragraph of the report's conclusions, and thus it is recommended refusal for the following reasons. Whistle, the applicant has demonstrated that he complies with the local housing need criteria due to working for the family business. The siting of the dwelling is considered contrary to planning policies and deemed unacceptable. The land to which this application relates is detached from any defined settlement. The proposal site does not have any built residential development adjoining the site boundaries and will be clearly prominent within the rural setting. The proposed development would be exposed and visible from the passing highway, impacting on the site's long-standing rural character. Due to the open nature of the site, the dwelling will have a clear, prominent position within the rural setting and is not considered acceptable. Additionally, the site is close to several stated noise resources. This includes a dog training facility as well as the applicant's tractor repair and private hire business. As such, a full noise assessment report is required in order to fully consider the background noise levels from the adjoining land uses. And due to insufficient information being provided in support of the application, it has not been demonstrated that this development would not result in any harm to any future occupiers of the proposed dwelling. And finally, there's also the issue with regards to the fact that the application is submitted in outline, when the SPD clearly does indicate applications for local needs dwellings should be made in full. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my presentation on this application.
Thank you, Philip. We have 3 speakers on this item. Firstly, it's Mr. Graham Bold from Sutton Parish Council. Would you like to come forward, please? Oops. You have 3 minutes and we'll give you 30 seconds warning at the end, all being well.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Chairman, I'm the clerk of Sutton upon Tern Parish Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. It's unusual for me to intervene, but these types of applications have now become quite integral to what is a very rural parish's housing strategy. And I think that's the policy rub here, really. The policy rub is around settlement. And the interpretation, I think you've debated to some extent that on a previous application this afternoon, but I do think that there is an alternative argument to be had in terms of understanding settlement. So what I did in preparation for this meeting was to understand what the term farmstead held in terms of Shropshire's settlement. And there is a compelling policy argument to look at in terms of farmstead and landscape. And if you look at the farmstead and landscape project that was commissioned with Dr. Andy Wrigley and Charlotte Baker back in 2008-2009, that picks out particularly farmstead in its historical setting. And I think there's lessons to be learned there really in terms of this application. Because it's not the first, and I suspect it won't be the last, and the role that farmsteads plays in terms of settlement. There is local distinctiveness, the policy says, the document says, in the sense of place, through their varied forms, and I underline that, varied forms. It's not a single sort of understanding of it. Also the use of materials, and its relation to the surrounding form and pattern of landscape is the understanding of settlement and the place of the farmstead within it. It's a key character. it has shaped the development of rural Shropshire, farmsteads and their relationship to settlements, for the production of food and other activity within surrounding farmland. And the document goes on to say that its sporadic cottages may be provided for farm workers within that sort of understanding of farmstead and settlement. And in some ways this application sets out that activity at an outline stage in a modern concept.
30 seconds left.
Thank you. A farmstead is to be understood as a homestead of a farm where the farmhouse is a working building. Its location is on edges of villages, in isolation, and in clusters. I would argue, Chairman, on behalf of Sutton-upon-Tern Parish Council, that this application is supported at this point at outline stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, we have the local member, Rob Gittins. He's been hiding somewhere, I can't see him. Good afternoon, Rob. We know how it works, but you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee, and thank you, committee members and officers, for taking the time to look at this application. I'd like to start by giving a little bit of background, actually. The council undertook a survey known as Right Home, Right Place a couple of years ago to establish and take a look at housing needs within the parish of Sutton-upon-Tern. The survey found that some 10 to 15 people came forward with a fundamental need for more local need and agricultural dwellings. This application has been born out of that process. I do think it is imperative that as a council we listen to the concerns and thoughts raised by our residents. Otherwise, I'm worried that we will be accused of not listening. Very often we seem to be building the wrong houses in the wrong places. It's all very well building very expensive houses in places like Hinstock and Market Drayton. But what about the local young people who've grown up within the parish and have lived there their whole lives and are unable to afford to purchase a property within the parish? And I could even go on to say unlikely to be able to afford a property within the local town of Market Drayton. I would like at this point to quote a couple of lines from page 8 of our corporate plan. There is a declining population of traditional working age people in Shropshire and a particular lack of younger people staying in the county. This strikes me as being pretty disturbing, as we have a very good application such as this that officers are looking to refuse, yet we are essentially telling the applicant, sorry, you can't live within the parish. You most probably can't afford to live in Market Drayton either, so you're best off going off to buy a house in Crewe or Stoke, which completely goes against the principles of our corporate plan for retaining younger people. We do have wider issues within the county, specifically around challenges to our adult social care budget. It is imperative that we retain our younger people within the county. And what better way of doing this than through a local needs dwelling? This applicant has grown up his whole life in the local area. He's attended the local schools. This is an incredibly good quality application. It's a good site and the local need has been extremely well demonstrated. There are no other available affordable dwellings located nearby, I believe this comes under Planning Policy MD7A, so I'm hoping that committee members will be very mindful of this and take this into consideration when determining this application. The principal issue that I believe planning officers have around this application is the location of the dwelling. Is it situated within a settlement or not? And I do feel that as a council, we need to show far more flexibility around this planning policy. And it's not always that straightforward. And generally, there are a fair few other elements that need to be taken into consideration. In this case, I would like committee members to consider the general layout of the surrounding area and whether they feel that this property would be in keeping within that local area. Having grown up in the area my whole life, I can confirm that many dwellings are indeed very spaced out and can come across as looking sparse, but that is the nature of this area. Even on Sandy Lane, there are a number of dwellings that are spaced out, and I will congratulate officers there on their
30 seconds left, Rob.
Thank you. I'm almost done actually. I will congratulate officers on their use of their zoom button on the maps. So this particular dwelling would not look out of place within the surrounding area. Could I ask committee members to think very carefully about this application and above all think about building the right house in the right place for the right people? Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Spot on.
Thank you.
Right, we have another speaker. We have the agent, Peter Richards. Would you like to come forward, please? Thank you, Peter. You know the runs. We'll give you a 30-second warning, okay?
Thank you. Members of the Planning Committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon to ask you to support this application for a local need dwelling. Applicant Lewis Tompkinson has a need to reside close to his family business. As a skilled agricultural engineer, he regularly attends customers in the area in emergency circumstances at unsociable hours. Lewis's need has been assessed and confirmed by the Council's Housing Enabling Team. Consistent with similar self-build affordable home proposals, the central issue in the consideration of this application is the suitability of the site and if it represents isolated, sporadic or unsustainable development. It is evident that planning judgment needs to be applied. Further to strong support from the Parish Council and the local ward member, Lewis has been encouraged to submit this application and pursue this application. With the Parish Council making it clear that this proposal is consistent with their community-led housing strategy, whereby there is a desire to allow the community's younger people build affordable homes. The NPPF advises that local authorities should support opportunities for rural exception housing that meets an identified local need. Plus, the Council's own core strategy allows for local housing in or adjacent settlements of all sizes. Shropshire's type of affordability of housing SPD encourages the suitability of the site to be assessed on its own merits and afford the opportunity to view the proposals for rural affordable housing positively and does not provide a definitive definition of a suitable site. Woodseas, or indeed Pell Wall, has a loose-knit spatial pattern with linear development positioned along its rural roads. Due to the fact the site has a building adjacent and buildings opposite, the suggestion it is isolated is contested. Similarly, the suggestion that the development would be prominent in its rural setting is also contested. The site is not prominent in the landscape. It is a level site with substantial native hedgerows for both the north and the south. In addition, Sandy Lane is a quiet rural lane with minimal amount of passing traffic. As highlighted in the officer's report, where the suitability of the site is in doubt, the views of the local member and the Parish Council should be canvassed. And whilst the officer's recommendation is acknowledged, the spirit of the Council's innovative policy to allow individual local needs homes to be built where needed should not be ignored. It is acknowledged that the regulatory
30 seconds.
Thank you. It's acknowledged that the regulatory services team have requested a noise assessment
and the applicant is willing to instruct a specialist acoustic consultant to undertake this assessment if councillors are minded to support the location. We would ask this application supported, as we believe it's in accordance with policy, and we would be happy to work with officers to undertake a noise assessment and finalise Section 106. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Peter, Philip, would you like to come back with anything just before we go?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, interesting points raised by the Parish Council and the local member with regards needs for affordable housing in open countryside. But I must remind officers, you are here today to determine the application against the current policies we have before us. And officers are very clear with this application. The policies do not support this dwelling in this location. Also, it's clearly a local needs dwelling the application is for, and not for an agricultural workers dwelling, which obviously that type of application would support a dwelling in a rural, more isolated location if there was a demonstrated need to be on site. Interesting what the agent just said about the noise assessment, because he was clearly asked about this by the case officer, and she was informed that they didn't wish to submit it, and the advice she had was to change it to an agricultural workers dwelling as part of Section 106. Well, we couldn't do that because it's a different set of policies. Finally, as I touched on earlier in my presentation, this application has been made in outline. Therefore, it is officer's opinion you don't have the full detail before you on which to consider. The SPD does emphasise how local needs dwellings should be made in full. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Right, I'll open up to the floor. Anybody want to indicate or kick off? Thank you, Mark.
First issue, my colleague Rob Gittins ended his speech with the right house, right place, right time. We haven't seen a picture of the house. We don't even know what it looks like. We haven't got a proper plan. So I can't quite turn round that with himself. I think he is building an open countryside. He hasn't proved to me that he needs a house on site. I mean, I've got a chap who lives about a quarter mile from me, and he works 10 miles up the road as an agricultural engineer, and he's just got a van and goes where he needs to, when he needs to. So I think this is a separate application we've had today from the agent, and neither have been a bit below par, to be fair. And I'm quite happy with the officer's recommendation to refuse it, to be fair.
So that's a proposal. Okay, any more comments or a seconder even?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It throws up the second time today our meaning of a defined settlement, and I think, especially me as a new councillor, and perhaps some other councillors as well, we need more guidance on what a defined settlement is and the difference between rural applications and local needs applications. Because again, the second time today we've had these decisions thrown upon us to make a decision on. So can I perhaps suggest that we get further guidance, maybe a training course or a review of the plan, so that we're all much more aware of what defined settlements are and how we can make decisions on those defined settlements. Because I'm being asked to make a decision today on something that I've got very, very little knowledge on and very little scope to expand my knowledge today on. So perhaps we could have that as before the next planning meeting, some sort of training on that subject.
I'm sure we will, Gary.
Yeah. And
because it's so close to the election and big agenda.
I appreciate that.
There are training sessions for planning, and we will address this problem.
Okay. And then I'd also like to propose that we go against the officer's recommendations based on Councillor Gitton's 4.22 reasons, and accept the plan as an outline plan, but with much more detail before we go any further with it.
Right. We have a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation at the moment. Any more comments? Or do I... Thank you, Edward.
Just come in, thank you. Following up your first comment, Gary, I think, and bearing in mind what Philip just said as well, if this fails on the basis of the current policies that the county has, then we ought to look, and I don't know how this takes place, new member and all that, we ought to look at those policies again, because I am concerned about local people getting local homes and helping our economy, especially an agricultural and rural one. So I think we've got some serious work to do there, and I would urge members from townships to consider the rural area of our county in this respect going forward. But if we're going to measure it against the standard policy, of course, we've got a fail on our hands here. It can't be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Edit. Miranda just wants to make a point, please.
Just for clarity, members, I mean, what you're actually looking at here is an application for a single plot exception site, and that is part of this council scheme, build your own scheme, and it is there to encourage rural dwellings. So there is that scheme that is supposed to help local people be able to build their own home, and that's the policy you're looking at. But there are parameters to that policy, and those are the ones against which the officers have assessed this application. So the Shropshire Type and Affordability of Housing SPD gives more guidance on, and which officers have drawn from, on how you assess the location. So, for example, the SPD does say that exception sites must be demonstrably part of or adjacent to a recognisable named settlement, for example. And it does say a settlement comprises a group of houses occupied by households from different families, and then it becomes a settlement due to the number and proximity of the houses in the group. And although a matter of judgment in each case, particularly for settlements where the number is small or where the houses are dispersed, for example, strung along a road, it is the combination of those two factors that determine whether the dwellings constitute a settlement. So that it also goes on to say that recognisable settlements are also characterised by how local people refer to them, by a place name that is shared by a number of dwellings that might not necessarily be reflected in the postal address. It will usually, but not always, be named on the OS map. Whether a site is in a recognised settlement will be influenced by the character of the settlement. Because a settlement is a relationship between different properties, the limits of the settlement are defined where the relationship peters out. This varies from settlement to settlement, depending on a number of factors. For example, a site a short distance from a loose-knit settlement may be considered adjoining, while a similar distance in a tightly clustered settlement would not be. Larger settlements also have a wider pool or sphere of influence than small settlements, influencing the relationship between a site and the settlements. So I think that gives you some further guidance which is to support how you think about that settlement. And also, you've heard about the issue of this being an outline application. So the scale of any individual scheme must also reflect the character and scale of the settlement, which obviously you don't have any details as to the design at this stage. So hopefully that assists members a little bit in your consideration of this matter, and those are the factors the officers have considered in reaching their recommendation.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Miranda. That gives a bit
Can
more
I just
light
clarify
on it.
on my proposal, Mr Chairman, if I may? So, going back to Councillor Gitton's 4.22, he refers to what Miranda just said there, in the fact that it's called Woodseas and it is on an ordnance survey map. But I agree that the outline application obviously doesn't give any details on the actual size of the house. So I'm minded to change my proposal to go against the officer's recommendations based on Councillor Gitton's proposal that it is Woodseas is a recognised development, but that we're given permission for a dwelling that would be in keeping with the surrounding dwellings within the area.
So that's a proposal, but I've got a proposal already in.
Sorry,
so,
okay.
Yeah. So what I do, Mike, did you indicate?
Yeah. Again, being a new member, there does seem to be a bit of a conflict between policies here. On the one hand, trying to encourage rural housing, and on the other, this definition of what is a settlement. But Miranda's words there lead me to think that this can be classed as a settlement because it clearly states that it doesn't have to be a cluster, it can be strung out along roads, and that local people's opinions have to be taken into consideration. So I think Councillor Gittins was saying that local people consider that area to be a settlement. And the parish council indeed supports this application on that basis. So I don't see a problem with supporting this. It seems to be that officers' interpretation is somewhat different to you know, people who live in some of these areas, and that's causing a conflict.
Always the case. Any more indicators to speak? Gerald.
Yeah, I'm not very happy with this proposal because we're not very certain about what should be happening, or we don't understand the policy properly. I understand that it's very difficult, and perhaps we should have some information more on it before we make the decision. But to make a decision when we don't understand it is quite ridiculous, and I'm against this proposal.
Right. I've got a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Gerald was just doing that.
To refuse. Gerald, is that a seconder? Are you seconding?
I'm against the proposal.
Pardon?
I'm against the proposal.
So are you seconding Mark's proposal to go with the officer's recommendation?
Yes.
Right. Okay, I know there's another proposal there, but I'm just going to take some advice on this, Miranda.
With you.
You vote first. We need some more information. Yeah. Dead right.
It's like a fight, isn't it?
If you vote on Mark's proposal, then if it's proposed, then mine is not for it, but if it's refused.
You went first, so the vote on that now. Vote no. Yeah, if that fails, it doesn't go in the
Yeah. Okay. Right. There is the set on mine.
Right. Just for clarification,
it's not acceptable.
So if there's no more comments, we can go to the vote on the first proposal.
Yep.
Then if that falls, we'll have a look at it again. So we can go to the vote because we've got a proposer and a seconder to go with the officer's recommendation. So we shall vote on that now. To go with his officer's recommendation, who is in favour?
Sorry, Chair. I couldn't quite hear what you were saying then.
Sorry?
I couldn't quite hear what you were saying then. So just,
okay. We've got a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation and a seconder. So we're going to take a vote on that now. To go with the officer's recommendation. Do we have a proposer and a seconder on that? Okay?
Which, for the avoidance of doubt through you, Chair, is that the proposal should be refused for the reasons given. So that's just the officer's recommendation, which is what this proposal is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right, everybody clear what we're voting on? We're going for the officer's recommendation. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Chair.
5. Against.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right, then I have to cast in votes. We go with the officer's recommendation. I know that bit. Right, okay. So we moving on to the next item, which happens to be one I'm involved in. So I shall leave the room completely and leave it to my vice chair to take it. Is that okay?
I'll be leaving the room as well.
Councillor Barrow's leaving also.
I think Gerald is as well, is he?
Gerald?
Gerald?
While they're leaving the room, item 11 is obviously on Paul's farm, and so we have to go through full planning, although it's a smaller issue. Is Gerald left the building now? Has he gone?
Leave the room, Gerald, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's not your back.
Gerald and Joyce say they know Paul too well, so they're leaving the room as well. So who's the lead officer on this one? Kelvin?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the siting of shepherd's huts and glamping pods as part of an existing tourism development at Hadley Farm near Whitchurch. The application has been brought to the Planning Committee as the applicant is Councillor Wynne, and applications made by members are required to be determined by Planning Committee. I draw your attention to the additional comments made by the case officer on the additional letters to confirm that a revised drainage plan has now been received to clarify the points raised by the Canal and River Trust. And also we've reconsulted the Canals and Rivers Trust on that drainage plan, and they have confirmed that they are content with the arrangements for the disposal of the foul water from the touring caravans. And this was a matter which was outstanding at the time that the committee report was written. We have the first slide, please. So the application site is at the existing caravan park at Hadley Park, which is to the west of Whitchurch and adjacent to the Shropshire Union Canal. Next slide. This is an aerial photograph of the existing caravan park. You can see the hard standings to the southwest, and then the canal outside of the site, and then the dark area is a pond just outside of the site. Next slide. This is the proposed layout of the site. The proposal is to add 2 shepherd's huts and 1 additional glamping pod to the existing facility. The shepherd's huts are shown orange, and one of the purple ones would be on the eastern side, will be in the additional glamping pod. Next slide. And this is the same layout, just on a satellite view background. Next slide. This is the proposed drainage plan which was submitted, and on which the Canals and Rivers Trust have confirmed that they're happy with the drainage arrangements. Next slide. This shows the existing approved site extent. So the proposal for 3 additional units would not result in any significant change to the size or the extent of the currently approved site. The proposal would allow an increased number of units and improve the choice of accommodation at the site. There have been no objections from consultees. The Parish Council supports the application, and there have been no public representations. The expansion of an existing storage facility is supported by planning policy, and it is recommended that permission is granted subject to the conditions in the committee report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Calvin, if Paul wasn't a member, whether this would be undone delegated, would it, or not?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
If Paul wasn't a member of the planning committee, would this have been done under delegated authority, would it? Is it sort of a minor amendment?
There's no other triggers that would have required it to have been brought to the planning committee.
Okay. Okay, so we'll open the floor. Any comments? Mike Isherwood, Councillor Mike Isherwood.
I just move that we accept the proposal.
Thank you. Are you seconding that, Edward?
Yep.
Edward Towers, Councillor Edward Towers, you second it. No other comments, so can I hands up for 4? Everyone's for it, so that's passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for that. Right, turning to the agenda again.
Well, it failed, so don't worry about it.
We are number 12, appeals and appeal decisions. Any comments on that, Philip?
No. Mr. Chair, you'll note there's 2 been allowed and the rest have been dismissed.
Yeah, saw that. Any comments from the floor? No? Okay. So, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Difficult circumstances with these thingamajiggies and the masks, which we all hate, I'm sure. But hopefully we can get back to some sort of manner. It is a bit better than being at home, but hopefully we'll be back at Shire Hall soon and have a proper meeting as we used to have. So date of the next meeting, committee will be held on 2 p.m. on Tuesday the 6th of July. Thank you for your attendance, and I think it went quite well. And thank you to the new members. You did very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
If the streaming has stopped, can I just address the committee